The slave collar burned the moment his fingers brushed her skin, not because it rejected the Alpha King's touch, but because it recognized him. 5 years she'd scrubbed blood from marble floors and swallowed every insult like communion. 5 years the entire kingdom forgot she existed, forgot she had a name, forgot she'd once stood beside their king as his chosen mate. Tonight, when Darius Blackmore grabbed her wrist to drag her toward punishment, the bond between them didn't whisper. It detonated. But here's the thing about women everyone thinks are already dead. They've got nothing left to lose and everything to burn. Stay until the end to watch a discarded Omega become the reckoning this kingdom never saw coming. Drop a like if you're watching, comment your city, and let's see how far this fire spreads. The castle's kitchen floor had been designed by someone who'd never scrubbed it. Kayla's knees screamed where they pressed against decorative tiles. Beautiful, intricate stonework that had probably cost more than most pack members earned in a year, and absolutely hell on human joints. Her hands were past feeling. The lye soap had eaten through her skin weeks ago, leaving raw meat that cracked and bled with every brushstroke. The bucket beside her held water the color of old pennies, thick with grime she'd been pushing around since midnight. 3:47 in the morning, she knew without checking. You learned to tell time by pain when you lived like this. The collar pulsed. Kayla froze mid-scrub, one hand braced against the floor, waiting. The cursed silver around her throat throbbed once, twice, sending nausea rolling through her gut like a wave. She breathed through her nose, slow, controlled, until it passed. 5 years wearing this thing, and it still found new ways to remind her it was there. New ways to smother the wolf she could barely remember having. Most days she forgot what her own voice sounded like in her head. The collar saw to that, kept her quiet on the outside and silent on the inside where it mattered most. She went back to scrubbing. Still at it? The voice came from behind her. Mira, one of the junior kitchen maids. 17, maybe 18. Young enough to still have hope. Old enough to know how the world worked. She'd found her place in the hierarchy by making sure someone was always beneath her. Tonight, that someone was Kayla. Almost done, Kayla said. Her voice came out rough, unused. She'd barely spoken in 2 days. You missed the corner by the ovens. Mira moved closer, her boots clicking on the tile. Expensive boots. New. Oren's going to do his inspection in an hour. You know how he gets. Kayla knew. Steward Oren lived for finding fault, for the small power that came with making other people's lives harder. She shifted on her ruined knees, dragging the brush toward the corner Mira indicated. The spot was already clean. They both knew it. But this wasn't about clean floors. It never was. Good girl, Mira said, sweet as poisoned honey. Then she turned, her skirt deliberately catching the edge of Kayla's bucket. Gray water sloshed over the rim, flooding across stones Kayla had spent the last hour cleaning. The bucket tipped, fell. The sound of it clattering against tile was obscenely loud in the pre-dawn quiet. Mira kept walking. Kayla sat back on her heels, staring at the spreading pool of dirty water, and felt absolutely nothing. 5 years ago, this would have made her angry, made her wolf snarl and snap. Now it was just another thing that happened, another small cruelty in an endless chain of them. She gathered the bucket, started over. By the time pale light started filtering through the high windows, she'd cleaned the same section 6 times. Her hands weren't shaking from exhaustion anymore. They'd moved past that into a weird, detached numbness. But her stomach was a different story. When had she last eaten? The question floated through her mind, distant and unimportant. Yesterday morning? Day before? The castle fed its servants, technically. Breakfast and dinner in the lower hall, portions determined by rank. Omegas ate last, took what was left. Most days, there wasn't anything left. Most days, Kayla was too tired to care. But today, this morning, the hunger had teeth. She pushed to her feet, her knees popping loud enough to make her wince. The kitchen was coming alive around her, fires being stoked in the massive hearths, bread dough being shaped by hands that knew the work by heart. The early shift cooks moving through their morning routines with practiced efficiency. No one looked at her. The caller made sure of that. Its magic was subtle, insidious. It didn't make her invisible exactly, just forgettable. People's eyes would slide right past her, their attention catching on more important things. She could stand in a room full of pack members and not one of them would remember she'd been there. Safest that way, probably. Safest. Kayla was halfway to the scullery carrying her bucket and brush when the smell hit her. Bread. Fresh bread, just out of the oven. The scent was so overwhelming it stopped her mid-step. Her vision tunneled, her mouth flooded with saliva. Somewhere distant, she heard the bucket hit the floor again, but the sound barely registered. The loaves were cooling on racks near the back door. 24 of them, golden brown and perfect, their crusts splitting to reveal soft white centers that were still steaming, destined for the Alpha King's breakfast table, destined for people who'd never known what it felt like to be this hungry. Her feet were moving. She didn't decide to move, didn't make a choice. Her body just went. 10 steps to the cooling rack. 12. The head cook was shouting at someone about cream. The maids were clustered near the hearth, gossip more important than vigilance. Just one loaf, the misshapen one on the end. They might not even, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Every sound in the kitchen died. Kayla's hand was 6 inches from the bread. She looked up slowly, already knowing, already feeling the bottom drop out of everything, into Stuart Oren's narrow, pinched face. He stood in the doorway like a carry-on bird, all sharp angles and self-righteous fury. His uniform was immaculate. His keys jangled at his belt as he stepped into the kitchen, and every servant in the room suddenly discovered urgent tasks elsewhere. "I asked you a question, Omega." The word landed like a slap. Not her name. She barely remembered having one. Just Omega, said like a curse. Like the lowest rung on the hierarchy ladder was the only thing worth knowing about her. Kayla's throat closed. What could she say? That she was starving? That the collar's magic was draining what little energy she had left? That she'd stopped being able to think straight somewhere around day 3 of not eating? Stealing, Oren finished for her, his lip curling. From the Alpha King's table. You were stealing. It's 1 loaf. The words came out before she could stop them, desperate and sharp. 1 loaf. And it's not even shaped right. You'd probably throw it to the pigs anyway. The slap caught her across the face, hard enough to snap her head sideways. The kitchen went silent. Even the fires seemed to quiet. Kayla's cheek throbbed. She could taste blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. But she kept her eyes down, her hands loose at her sides. 5 years had taught her that much. Fight back, and it gets worse. Always worse. You don't speak unless spoken to. Oren's voice was soft now, deadly. You don't take unless given, and you certainly don't steal from your betters. He leaned in close, his breath sour. Do you know what we do to thieves in this kingdom? Kayla knew. Everyone knew. Public punishment, examples made. She'd seen it happen to others, though never to someone wearing a collar like hers. People like her usually just disappeared. You'll be brought before the Alpha King, Oren said, straightening. Tonight. Let him decide what to do with you. The world tilted. No, not him. Anyone but, please. The words scraped out of her. Please, I'll work double shifts. I'll do anything. Just don't. You'll do as you're told. Oren turned to address the rest of the kitchen, his voice carrying with practiced authority. Let this be a lesson. The hierarchy exists for a reason. Alphas rule. Omegas serve. Those who forget their place. He glanced back at Kayla, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes, are reminded of it. 2 guards materialized from somewhere. Had they been waiting in the corridor? Had Oren planned this? And grabbed Kayla's arms. The collar pulsed hard, once, and her knees gave out. The guards caught her weight, half dragging her from the kitchen, while every servant watched in silence. Nobody spoke up. Nobody ever did. The holding cell was exactly the kind of room you'd expect for disposable people. Small, stone, cold, a single window too high to reach, barred with iron that had rusted decades ago. Kayla huddled in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to get her breathing under control. The collar felt tighter now, like it knew she was afraid, like it was feeding on her fear and using it to press closer, tighter, until she couldn't tell where the curse ended and her own throat began. Darius Blackmore. 5 years. 5 years of structuring her entire existence around never being in the same room as him. Taking the night shifts when he held court. cleaning the East Wing when he was in the West, becoming so invisible, so forgettable, that even if they passed in a corridor, his gaze would slide right over her. And now she was going to be dragged before him, accused of theft, with nowhere to hide. The memories came anyway. They always did when she was alone with nothing to distract her. 6 years ago, she'd been 21. Newly presented as Omega, which should have been a death sentence in a pack that valued strength above all else. But then the mate bond had hit like lightning. One look at Darius Blackmore and her entire world had reoriented around him. The pull was undeniable, overwhelming, the kind of connection the old stories promised, faded, inevitable. She'd thought he felt it too. For 6 months she'd lived in a dream. He'd courted her quietly, away from pack politics and public scrutiny. Stolen moments in the library, late-night walks through the gardens, his hands in her hair, his voice rough with want, promising her a future she'd been desperate enough to believe in. She'd thought she was going to be Luna. God, she'd been stupid. Then Queen Seraphine had arrived from the Northern Territories, beautiful, powerful, an alpha female with magic that seemed to shimmer in the air around her. Darius had introduced her at a state dinner as his chosen queen, his true mate, and Kayla had stood among the servants, already demoted, though she couldn't remember when or how, and felt something inside her shatter. He hadn't even looked at her that night. Within a week, the collar had appeared around her neck. No trial, no explanation, just the cursed silver locking into place and her wolf screaming as the magic smothered it into silence. And slowly, so slowly she hadn't noticed it happening, everyone had started to forget her. Her name, her face, the fact that she'd ever been anything other than another faceless Omega servant, including Darius. Kayla pressed her forehead against her knees and tried not to scream. The door clanged open. She flinched, expecting guards, but it was Mira standing in the doorway, holding a cloth bundle. "Here," she tossed it onto the floor. "Bread and water. Orin said you should eat before you see the king. Can't have you fainting and making the whole thing take longer." Kayla stared at the bundle, not moving. "It's not poisoned," Mira said, rolling her eyes. "Though honestly, might be kinder if it was. Better than whatever he's planning." "Why are you here?" Kayla's voice came out like gravel. "Because Orin told me to bring you food." Mira shifted her weight, uncomfortable. For just a second, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or the ghost of empathy. But it disappeared before Kayla could be sure. "Look, I don't know what you did before all this. Don't know why you're wearing that thing or why everyone treats you like dirt. But stealing from the Alpha King's table? That's just asking for it. I was hungry. Then you should have begged like everyone else." Mira turned to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope he makes it quick." The door slammed shut. Kayla sat in the silence for a long moment, staring at the bundle. Then she crawled forward and unwrapped it. Bread. Half a loaf, the misshapen one she'd reached for, and a clay cup of water that had probably come from the same bucket she'd been using to clean floors. She ate anyway, slowly, mechanically, because spite was all she had left, and if Darius Blackmore was going to punish her, exile her, execute her, whatever he'd decided Omega thieves deserved, then she'd face it on a full stomach. The bread tasted like ash. She swallowed every bite. Oh, they came for her at sunset. The guards were young, probably new recruits, and they kept their eyes straight ahead as they bound her hands in front of her. Unnecessary, given the collar's magic, but protocol was protocol. They marched her through corridors she barely recognized. Had they always been this grand? This beautiful? She'd forgotten. 5 years of keeping her head down, of taking servants' passages and back stairs, and she'd forgotten what the castle actually looked like. Tapestries depicting ancient battles hung from stone walls. Chandeliers dripped crystal. The carpets under her bare feet were thick enough to swallow sound. Everything was rich, heavy, designed to remind you that power lived here. The throne room doors were carved oak reinforced with iron, depicting a massive wolf mid-leap. They swung open, and Kayla's step faltered. The room was packed. Not just Darius on his throne, though he was there, dark and imposing against black marble, but dozens of pack members, nobles in fine clothes, advisors with calculating eyes. This wasn't a private judgment. This was theater. They were making an example. Kayla kept her chin up as the guards marched her down the center aisle. Whispers followed like flies. Is that Omega who stole half dead already? What did she expect? The throne sat on a raised dais at the far end, and beside it in a smaller chair, but no less regal, was Queen Seraphine. She watched Kayla's approach with ice-blue eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Everything about her was calculated perfection. The fall of her blonde hair, the cut of her gown, the way she held herself like violence wrapped in silk. And next to her, Darius. Kayla's breath caught. 5 years hadn't softened him. If anything, he looked harder, sharper, like something had carved away everything unnecessary and left only the brutal essentials of an alpha in his prime. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw. His eyes were storm gray, cold and assessing as they tracked her approach. He didn't recognize her. She could see it in the blank indifference of his expression, the way his gaze catalogued and dismissed her in the same breath. The guards forced her to her knees 10 feet from the throne. The stone was cold against her shins. Kayla kept her eyes down, focusing on the mosaic beneath her, a wolf and crown intertwined, beautiful and terrible. Alpha King Darius, Steward Orin's voice rang out, formal and unctuous. I bring before you the Omega-designated Kayla, accused of theft from the royal kitchens. Theft. Darius's voice was exactly as she remembered, deep, authoritative, edged with something that could cut. Of what? Bread, my lord, intended for your breakfast table. Laughter rippled through the nobles. Someone muttered about Omega greed. Kayla's bound hands curled into fists. Look at me. The command bypassed her brain entirely, yanking her head up through sheer alpha dominance. Her eyes met his, and the world exploded. It was like being struck by lightning, like every nerve in her body suddenly screaming the same word. Mate! The bond roared to life between them, a golden thread she'd thought severed, burned away, dead and gone. But it wasn't dead. It had never been dead. It was alive and furious and reaching for him across the space that separated them. Darius's eyes went wide. His hand gripped the throne arm hard enough that she heard wood crack. The air in the room thickened, charged with something ancient and undeniable. For one perfect, impossible second, she saw recognition flash across his face. Then the collar pulsed. Hard. Kayla gasped, doubling over as the curse slammed through her system like a fist. The bond didn't disappear. She could still feel it, writhing and desperate in her chest. But it was muted now, dampened, smothered under layers of dark magic. Her wolf whimpered somewhere deep inside, clawing at barriers that wouldn't break. When she looked up again, Darius's expression had shuddered. Whatever he'd felt, if he'd felt anything, was buried now. You stole from the crown, he said. His voice was flat, empty. Kayla's throat was raw. I was hungry. That's not an excuse. Wasn't offering one. The word surprised her. Maybe it was the mate bond thrashing in her chest. Maybe it was 5 years of swallowing every retort until the poison built up enough to leak out. Just stating a fact. The room went quiet. Queen Seraphine leaned forward, her smile widening. Did the Omega just speak back to you, darling? Darius didn't look at her. His gaze was locked on Kayla, and something moved behind his eyes, confusion, maybe. Or the first stirrings of recognition trying to claw its way through whatever magic was keeping him blind. His hand lifted slightly, as if to reach toward her. The collar pulsed again. Harder. Kayla's vision whited out as pain spiked through her skull. When it cleared, she was panting, sweat beading on her forehead, her whole body shaking. The punishment for theft, Orin was saying, satisfaction dripping from every word, is typically removal of the offending hand. However, given this Omega's limited value to the pack, perhaps a more permanent solution. No. Everyone turned to stare at Darius. He stood abruptly, descending the dais steps with predator grace. The crowd parted like water. Kayla's wolf gave a pitiful whine, even through the collar's suppression. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell him, pine and smoke, and something wilder underneath. Close enough that the bond was screaming at her to close the distance, to touch him, to make him remember. Stand up. Kayla stood, her legs shook. They were nearly the same height with her on the lower step. His eyes were level with hers. and this close she could see the gold flecks in the gray, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a training accident when he was 15. She'd been there when it happened, had pressed her scarf against the wound to stop the bleeding. Did he remember? Did any part of him remember? "What's your name?" he asked quietly. The question was a knife. "Kayla." "Kayla what?" "Just Kayla." The lie tasted like copper. Omegas don't have surnames. Something flickered across his face, frustration or anger, she couldn't tell. He reached toward her, his hand moving to the collar. The shock threw them both backward. Darius stumbled into a pillar. Kayla hit the floor hard, all the air knocked from her lungs. The collar was burning, actually burning. She could smell her own skin scorching, and she clawed at it uselessly, a scream building in her throat. "Get the healer!" "Don't touch her. The magic—" "What is that collar doing?" Hands grabbed her arms, hauling her upright. Through the haze of pain, she saw Darius being restrained by his own guards, his face pale and shocked. He was staring at her like he'd seen a ghost, like he was starting to remember. "The collar is cursed." Seraphine's voice cut through the chaos, clear and cold. She'd descended from her throne and now stood beside Darius, one hand possessive on his arm. Blood magic, designed to completely suppress an Omega's wolf. When an alpha touches it, the magical feedback can be severe. "Why is she wearing it?" Darius demanded, still staring at Kayla. "Who authorized?" "You did, my love." Seraphine's tone was patient, almost pitying. 5 years ago. Don't you remember? She tried to seduce you, claimed a false mate bond to elevate her position. This was your judgment. Lies. The words screamed in Kayla's head, battering against her teeth, desperate to get out. But the collar pulsed again, and this time the pain came with something else. A creeping numbness that started in her throat and spread like frost, stealing her voice, her strength, her ability to fight. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Darius's face, twisted with confusion and something that might have been horror. Then nothing. She woke in the cell again. A healer was bending over her, older woman, gray hair, kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. She was applying salve to the burn marks on Kayla's neck with gentle, practiced hands. Kayla flinched away instinctively. "Easy," the healer murmured. "The collar's magic reacted to his alpha dominance. You're lucky it didn't kill you both." "Lucky." The word felt obscene in her mouth. The healer finished bandaging her neck and sat back. "I've done what I can. The burns will heal, but the collar—" She shook her head. "That's beyond my skill." "Doesn't matter." Kayla's voice was hoarse. "Won't be wearing it much longer anyway." The healer's expression shifted, something sad and knowing. "The Alpha King delayed your sentencing. He wants time to consider." After she left, Kayla lay on the cold stone and stared at the ceiling. Her mind was racing, putting pieces together that had been scattered for 5 years. The collar had cracked when Darius touched it. Not broken, but cracked. And in that moment, she'd felt her wolf stir. Weak, distant, but there. Still there. The mate bond was alive, muted by the curse, suppressed by whatever dark magic Seraphine had woven, but alive. And Darius, for just a second, she'd seen recognition in his eyes, like something in him remembered even though his conscious mind didn't. 5 years ago, dark magic had stolen her identity, had rewritten reality so thoroughly that even her mate had forgotten her. But magic could break, curses could crack, and Kayla Thorne, stripped of everything, left to rot in the shadows, made a decision. She wouldn't scream the truth, wouldn't rush forward with accusations that would get her killed before anyone believed her. Seraphine's magic was too deeply woven into the kingdom's fabric. Too many people had forgotten. Too many lies had become accepted truth. No, she would survive. Watch. Learn. Wait. But this time she wouldn't be invisible. This time she'd be hunting. The thought settled into her bones with cold certainty. She had no power, no allies, no weapons except 5 years of rage and a mate bond that refused to stay dead. It would have to be enough. Because one way or another, Kayla was going to tear down every lie built on her grave. She was going to burn it all down, the false queen, the stolen throne, the dark magic that had erased her. And she was going to start with the woman wearing her crown. In the darkness of the cell, Kayla smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It wasn't the expression of someone who'd given up or accepted defeat. It was the smile of a wolf that had just remembered it had teeth. Let them think she was broken. Let them think she was beaten, half dead, not worth worrying about. She'd use every assumption, every dismissal, every moment they looked right past her. She'd been invisible for 5 years. She knew how to move through shadows, how to listen, how to wait. And when the moment came, when she'd gathered enough truth, enough proof, enough power to make them see her, she'd strike. The game was changing. And this time Kayla Thorne was done playing by anyone's rules but her own. They released her on the 3rd day with no explanation. Just unlocked the cell door, told her to get out, and walked away like she was contaminated. No sentencing, no judgment, no answers to any of the questions burning in her throat. The guard wouldn't even meet her eyes when she asked what was happening, just pointed toward the stairs with a shaking hand and disappeared down the corridor, like he couldn't get away fast enough. Kayla stood in the dim passageway outside the holding cells, wrists still bearing rope burns that had scabbed over during her confinement, and tried to understand what game was being played. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her, 3 days of minimal food and water taking their toll. The collar pulsed once against her throat, a reminder that whatever freedom she'd been granted was temporary and conditional. This wasn't mercy. Darius Blackmore didn't do mercy, and Stuart Oren certainly didn't believe in second chances for people like her. This was something else entirely. A test, maybe. Or a trap with jaws she couldn't see yet, waiting for her to step wrong so they could spring shut and finish what they'd started. She made her way through the servant passages on autopilot, her body remembering the route even when her brain was too busy trying to calculate angles and possibilities. The castle was waking up around her in that pre-dawn gray zone, fires being stoked in kitchen hearths, chamber pots being emptied from noble quarters, the endless machinery of serving the powerful grinding back into motion. Voices echoed off stone walls. Footsteps clattered on ancient floors. Life continuing its relentless forward march like she'd never been gone. Like those 3 days in a cell had been nothing more than a minor interruption in the natural order of things. Nobody looked at her. The caller made absolutely sure of that, its magic sliding her right out of people's attention like oil refusing to mix with water. She could walk past a group of servants and they'd keep talking like she wasn't there, their eyes skipping over her to find more important things to focus on. Invisible. Forgettable. Safe. Except she didn't feel safe anymore. But Kayla was looking now, really looking in a way she hadn't allowed herself for 5 long years. She'd spent so much time keeping her head down, avoiding attention, trying to disappear into the background, that she'd stopped seeing the mechanisms of power moving around her. Now she watched everything. How the senior maids moved through corridors with confidence born from years of knowing exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. How the newer servants kept their heads down and their mouths shut. Which guards were actually paying attention to their surroundings, and which ones were just going through the motions of a shift they'd worked 1,000 times before. She noticed who spoke to whom, who avoided whom, which servants had the ear of which nobles, the invisible web of relationships and debts and favors that actually made the castle function beneath all the official chains of command. Information was a weapon. She'd just never bothered to pick it up before because she'd been too busy surviving to think about fighting back. That was going to change. The servants' quarters smelled like mildew and unwashed bodies and despair, a cramped warren of tiny rooms carved into the castle's basement where sunlight was nothing more than a distant memory. The air was thick and stale, recycled through too many lungs with nowhere to go. Kayla's space, calling it a room would be absurdly generous, was barely large enough for the straw pallet she slept on. Someone had taken her blanket while she was locked up. The thin pillow that had been her only luxury was gone too, probably claimed by whoever had decided 3 days was long enough to establish salvage rights. She sat on the bare pallet and took inventory of absolutely everything she owned in this world. One ragged dress, stained with years of cleaning chemicals and wear. The collar, cursed silver warm against her skin. Her own scarred hands and the body that had somehow kept functioning despite everything. That was it. That was the sum total of her possessions after 5 years of servitude. No allies she could count on. No leverage to use against her enemies. No weapons except her brain and whatever scraps of determination she could scrape together. The curse around her throat prevented her from accessing her wolf, which meant no enhanced strength, no accelerated healing, no connection to the pack link that bound everyone else together. She was functionally human in a world explicitly designed for predators, trying to play a game where everyone else had claws and she had nothing but spite. But she had something now that she hadn't possessed 3 days ago. She had Darius's attention. The memory played on repeat behind her eyes, vivid and sharp-edged. His face when the caller shocked them both, the confusion bleeding into horror, bleeding into that brief flash of recognition, cutting through whatever magic kept him blind and compliant. He'd felt the mate bond. She was certain of it. For one perfect, crystalline second, the false memories Seraphine had layered over his mind had cracked like ice over a frozen lake, and something real had broken through to the surface. That was a thread, thin as spider silk, fragile as trust, but real and solid and there. She could work with the thread, pull it carefully enough, and the whole tapestry might unravel. "Didn't expect to see you again." Kayla looked up slowly. Mira stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, her expression complicated in ways that were hard to read. Surprise, definitely. Maybe a flicker of relief, quickly suppressed. Or disappointment that Kayla was still breathing and taking up space that could have gone to someone else. "Disappointed?" Kayla asked, her voice rough from disuse. "Curious?" Mira shifted her weight from foot to foot, uncomfortable. "Oren's been in a rage since yesterday. Says the Alpha King went soft, letting Omega Trash walk free after theft from the royal kitchens." Her gaze flicked to the caller, lingering there. "What happened up there in the throne room? Everyone's talking about some kind of magical explosion. Davies said he saw lightning. Petra swears the whole room shook." "I touched something I shouldn't have," Kayla said carefully. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Kayla pushed to her feet, ignoring how her vision swam and darkened at the edges. 3 days on, nothing but stale bread and questionable water had hollowed her out, left her running on fumes and willpower. She needed real food before her body gave up completely and made the decision to stop functioning without consulting her first. Mira didn't move from the doorway, blocking the exit whether intentionally or not. "You've been reassigned. Personal order from Steward Oren himself." Something cold and heavy settled in Kayla's stomach like a stone dropping into dark water. "Reassigned where?" "North Wing." Mira's smile had edges sharp enough to cut. "Royal quarters. Guess if you're going to steal from the Alpha King, you should do it where he can watch you directly. The North Wing, where Darius lived and worked and slept, where Seraphine held court in rooms that should have been Kayla's by right of the mate bond, where every surface would smell like him, where the bond would constantly pull at her like a fishhook lodged in her chest. This wasn't mercy or forgiveness or any kind of reward. This was Oren putting her exactly where she'd be most uncomfortable, most visible, most likely to make a mistake that would justify permanent removal from the castle and possibly from breathing. He was setting her up to fail, placing her in a position where one wrong word or misplaced glance could be interpreted as another attempt at seduction or manipulation. Or it was something else entirely, another game she didn't have enough information to understand yet. "When do I start?" Kayla asked. "Now." Mira stepped aside finally, but her expression remained troubled. "Head of household is Marissa. She's waiting for you in the North Wing entrance hall. And Kayla?" Something almost like genuine concern flickered across her face before she could suppress it. "Don't touch anything you're not supposed to. Don't look at anyone wrong. Don't even breathe in a way that could be misinterpreted. That wing eats people and spits out bones." Kayla nodded once and stepped past her into the corridor. She didn't look back. The North Wing was a completely different world, separated from the servants' quarters by more than just physical distance. Where the basement was cramped and dark and smelled like decades of accumulated misery, this was spacious and bright and designed to remind everyone who walked through it that power lived here. Thick carpets in rich burgundy and gold-muffled footsteps. Tapestries depicting famous pack battles and historical victories covered stone walls that had been scrubbed clean of any hint of age or wear. Tall windows with actual glass, not the shuttered openings common in the lower levels, let in sunlight that seemed almost obscene in its abundance. Kayla had forgotten what real sunlight felt like on her skin. 5 years in the basement had leached the memory right out of her. She found Marissa waiting in a small antechamber, standing with the rigid posture of someone who'd spent 60-some years perfecting the art of disapproval. Her gray hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, not a single strand out of place. She examined Kayla the way you'd examine something dead and rotting that you'd found in the middle of an otherwise pleasant road. with distaste and the clear desire to remove it as quickly as possible. "You're the Omega who caused that scene in the throne room," Marissa said. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered with all the warmth of a winter blizzard. "Yes, ma'am." "I don't care what the Alpha King ordered or why Stuart Oren thinks placing you here is appropriate. You step one single toe out of line, you so much as look at someone the wrong way, and you're back in those cells." Marissa's eyes were hard as flint. "Are we absolutely clear on that point?" "Yes, ma'am. You'll be responsible for maintaining the private library and adjoining study. Dusting, polishing, keeping the fires going, general upkeep. The Alpha King works there most evenings when he's not in council meetings or dealing with pack business. You do not speak to him unless directly addressed. You do not touch anything on the desk or reading tables. You do not linger in any room longer than your tasks require. You are a piece of furniture that cleans. Nothing more. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Marissa handed her a wooden bucket filled with cleaning supplies, cloths, polish, a brush, soap that smelled faintly of lemon. "Third door on the left down that corridor. The Alpha King is in council meetings until sunset. You have until then to make it absolutely spotless. I'll be inspecting your work." Kayla took the bucket, the weight of it familiar and almost comforting in its normalcy, and walked in the direction Marissa had indicated. She could feel the older woman's stare burning into her back until she turned the corner and the line of sight broke. The library was absolutely massive, and for a moment Kayla could only stand in the doorway and stare. 2 full stories of floor-to-ceiling books, more books than she'd known existed in the entire kingdom. Leather furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes of servitude sat arranged in comfortable groupings. A fireplace large enough to roast a whole deer dominated one wall, currently dark and cold. Tall windows overlooked the training grounds where she could see pack warriors running drills in precise formation, their movements synchronized and lethal. And the smell, pine and old paper and wood smoke and something wilder underneath, Darius's scent woven into every surface like the room itself had absorbed his presence over years of use. It was overwhelming, hitting her harder than she'd expected, and the mate bond surged in response, reaching desperately for something that wasn't there. Kayla forced herself to breathe through her mouth and set down the bucket before she dropped it. She started with the most obvious tasks, the kind of mindless physical labor she could do without thinking. Dusted shelves she could barely reach even standing on her toes. Polished furniture that didn't look like it needed polishing, the wood already gleaming. Swept floors that were already clean, finding maybe 3 specks of dust in the entire vast space. But while her hands worked through the familiar motions, her eyes were cataloging absolutely everything with the intensity of someone who understood that information might be the only weapon she'd ever have. Books on military strategy left open on the reading table, pages marked with scraps of paper covered in notes. Maps spread across the massive desk, marking trade routes and border territories with different colored pins. Papers covered in bold, slashing handwriting, reports from various pack officials, letters from neighboring territories, notes scrawled in margins that suggested Darius was questioning the information he was receiving, evidence of the man he'd become in the years since Seraphine had rewritten his memories. The king who'd forgotten Kayla existed, but was still, fundamentally, the same person she'd fallen in love with. Smart, thoughtful, willing to question authority when something didn't make sense. She could work with that, if she was careful. Kayla was shelving books in the history section, standing on a small wooden stool to reach the higher shelves, when her hand brushed against something that didn't feel like the other volumes. She pulled it out carefully. A journal. Leather-bound, worn at the edges from years of handling, shoved between 2 larger books like someone had tried to hide it, and either failed or forgotten where they'd put it. Her hands were shaking as she opened it to the first page. The date was from 6 years ago. The handwriting was unmistakably Darius's. Her breath stopped completely. "The mate bond is driving me absolutely insane. Can't think about anything else. Can't sleep more than a few hours without dreaming about her. Can't focus in council meetings because I'm wondering what she's doing, if she's thinking about me, if she feels this same overwhelming pull. This isn't supposed to happen. Not to me, not like this, not when I have responsibilities that should matter more than personal feelings. But when I'm with Kayla, everything else just disappears. The throne, the pack politics, father's expectations, none of it matters. She makes me feel like I'm real, like I'm more than just the position I was born into. like I could be someone worth knowing even without the crown. The next page had been torn out, ripped roughly, leaving jagged edges that suggested violence or desperation, or both. Kayla flipped through the journal with trembling fingers that could barely hold the pages steady. Most of it was gone, whole sections torn out with the same rough urgency, leaving only fragments of thoughts and half-finished sentences that created a scattered, incomplete picture. Can't explain it to Father. He'd never understand. Political alliances and strengthening the pack are everything to him, and he's not wrong exactly, but Kayla is different. She's not interested in the crown or the power or any of the usual things people want from me. When she looks at me, she sees me, not the future Alpha King. And when I'm with her, I feel another missing page. Then, Mother announced today that Seraphine will be arriving next month for a diplomatic visit. Says a northern alliance would strengthen our borders, give us leverage against the eastern territories. She's probably right from a strategic standpoint, but the way she talks about it, like my eventual marriage is just another political tool to be deployed. It makes me feel sick. I don't want a political alliance. I want Kayla. I want to wake up next to her for the rest of my life. I want to build something real, something that matters beyond borders and treaties and power. More torn pages. The next intact entry was dated 3 weeks later. Seraphine arrived yesterday. She's everything Mother said she'd be. Beautiful, powerful, politically connected, exactly the kind of match that would benefit the pack. But I feel absolutely nothing when I look at her. Nothing except a growing sense that this is wrong, that I'm being pushed towards something that will destroy everything I actually care about. When she touches my arm, it feels wrong. When she laughs at something I say, it sounds hollow. She's playing a part, and she's expecting me to play mine, and I hate every second of it. Another gap. Then, in handwriting that was starting to look less controlled, more frantic. Something's happening. Can't quite explain it. Keep forgetting things. Conversations I know I had yesterday feel distant and unclear, like I'm trying to remember a dream that's already fading. Tried to talk to Kayla this morning and couldn't remember what we'd discussed the night before. She looked hurt. I don't know how to fix this. Don't know what's wrong with me. Can't remember her face clearly anymore. How is that possible? She's the most important person in my world, and I can't picture her face without really concentrating. This isn't normal. The final entry was barely legible, the handwriting completely erratic and desperate, letters slanting in different directions like he'd been writing while something inside him was breaking. Why can't I remember her face? Why can't I remember her name? There was someone, I know there was someone vital and important and real. But when I try to hold on to the memory, it slips away like water through my fingers. Seraphine says I'm stressed, that I'm imagining things, that there's no one else and there never was. But she's lying. I know she's lying. I can feel it. There's someone I've forgotten, someone I've lost, someone who... The entry ended there, mid-sentence, like he'd been interrupted, or like the memories had finally dissolved completely and left him with nothing to write. Kayla closed the journal with shaking hands that could barely grip the leather cover. Her vision was blurred with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. This was proof, solid, tangible evidence that she'd existed, that the bond had been real, that Darius had loved her desperately before Seraphine had used blood magic to burn those memories out of his mind and replace them with lies. But even as hope flared in her chest, reality crushed it back down. This wasn't enough. A journal with torn pages and increasingly frantic entries wouldn't convince anyone of anything except that Darius had been under enormous stress 6 years ago. Seraphine's magic was too strong, too deeply woven into the fabric of the kingdom's reality. The false memories she'd created felt more real than actual truth to everyone who'd been touched by the spell. This would just look like the confused ramblings of a young alpha struggling with the pressure of his position. She needed more. She needed the anchor for Seraphine's spell, the physical object or sacrifice that was keeping the magic active and feeding it power. She needed proof that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. And she needed to survive long enough to find it. Kayla was sliding the journal back into its hiding place between the larger volumes when the door opened without warning. She spun around so fast she nearly fell off the stool, her heart launching itself into her throat. Darius stood in the doorway, and the sight of him hit her like a physical blow. He was dressed for training, leather pants that sat low on his hips, a loose shirt dark with sweat that clung to his shoulders and chest, hair damp and disheveled. He looked utterly exhausted, like he'd been pushing himself past any reasonable limit and then kept going purely on willpower. There were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well, tension in his shoulders that spoke of stress he couldn't shake. Their eyes met across the length of the library. The bond exploded between them. Kayla felt it in her chest, in her bones, in every single nerve ending suddenly screaming the same desperate word. Mate! 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 The caller immediately tried to suppress the connection, pulsing with heat that made her skin burn and her throat close up, but it couldn't completely smother the recognition roaring through her blood. The bond was alive, vital, reaching for him with an intensity that made everything else fade into irrelevance. Darius's hand went to his sternum like he'd been struck, his expression shifting from exhaustion to complete confusion. You, he said, his voice rough. Kayla's throat was desert dry, the caller making it even harder to force words out. My lord. What are you doing in here? Not accusatory exactly, just genuinely confused, like he was still trying to process what he was seeing and his brain wasn't cooperating. Cleaning. Steward Oren assigned me to the north wing. Oren. Something dangerous flashed in his storm gray eyes. He stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him with deliberate care, and Kayla fought every instinct that was screaming at her to either run or close the distance between them. The bond didn't know which it wanted more, safety or connection. You're the Omega from the throne room, the one with the collar that… He gestured vaguely at his own chest, where she knew he could feel the pull of the bond, even if he didn't understand what it meant. The magical backlash. Kayla, she said quietly, carefully. My name is Kayla. Something flickered across his face. Pain, confusion, recognition trying desperately to claw its way through layers of false memory and magical interference. I know that. He stopped, frustrated, and ran a hand through his damp hair, making it stand up in different directions. Why does your name sound so familiar? Like I should know it, like I should know you, but I can't remember from where. Because you used to whisper it in the dark while you held me. Because you promised me forever in a garden under moonlight. Because for 6 months we built something real before magic burned it away and replaced it with lies. I don't know, my lord, Kayla said instead, keeping her voice neutral and submissive. Darius moved closer and the bond pulled harder with each step he took. She could see it affecting him too, the way he leaned toward her unconsciously, the confusion deepening in his eyes as instinct warred with whatever false memories Seraphine had layered over his mind. He was close enough now that she could see the pulse jumping in his throat, count the individual drops of sweat on his collarbone, see the exact moment when recognition tried to surface and was brutally suppressed. Seraphine told me what happened 5 years ago, he said, his voice low and strained. She said you tried to seduce me, that you claimed a false mate bond to try to elevate your position in the pack, to gain power and status you hadn't earned, that the collar was my judgment for your deception, for trying to manipulate me. Every single word was a knife sliding between her ribs. Kayla forced herself to nod. Yes, my lord. But when I touched the collar in the throne room, his hand lifted toward the cursed silver around her throat, drawn by something he couldn't name. When the magic reacted and shocked us both, it didn't feel false. It felt… He stopped, struggling to find words. It felt like something breaking, like something that had been locked away suddenly trying to escape. Please don't touch it again, Kayla said quickly, stepping back until her shoulders hit the bookshelf. The magical feedback could kill you. The healer said, I don't care what the healer said, but Darius's hand dropped anyway, clenching into a fist at his side. I need to understand what's happening. Why do I feel like this? If the bond was false, if you were lying about everything, why do I feel like something's missing, like I've forgotten something absolutely vital and I can't remember what it is no matter how hard I try? This was it, the opening she desperately needed. Maybe, Kayla said very carefully, measuring every single word, you should ask your queen about that, about what really happened 5 years ago. The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a fire that had just started burning. Darius's expression shifted rapidly, surprise bleeding into suspicion, bleeding into something that might have been anger. What exactly does that mean? Nothing, my lord. I apologize. I shouldn't have spoken out of turn. No. He closed the remaining distance between them in 2 long strides, and suddenly he was right there, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, close enough to count the gold flecks scattered through his gray eyes like stars. You meant something specific. What do you know? What aren't you saying? Everything. Nothing. Pieces of a truth that magic won't let you see, no matter how clearly I show it to you. I know, Kayla said slowly, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. That blood magic can do terrible things. Rewrite memories so the false ones feel more real than truth. Make people forget what actually happened and believe lies instead. Make someone forget the most important person in their life and think a stranger is their mate. Darius stared at her like she'd just spoken in a language he didn't know. You're saying Seraphine used blood magic on me to make me forget someone and believe she was my mate instead. I'm not saying anything definitive, Kayla said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm just a collared Omega who talks too much and should probably learn to keep her mouth shut. I can't forget you. The words came out rough, almost angry, like he was frustrated with himself for admitting it. That's the problem I keep running into. Every time I try to remember why you're wearing that collar, what you supposedly did to deserve it, the memories slip away before I can examine them properly. They're not solid. They don't have weight. They feel like someone told me a story, and I'm trying to remember the details, but I wasn't actually there when it happened. Because you weren't. Because none of it is real. Because Seraphine planted those memories in your head, and they don't have roots deep enough to hold under scrutiny. My lord, don't call me that. The words were sharp, almost desperate. When you say it, it sounds completely wrong, like you're supposed to call me something else entirely, but you've both forgotten what. Kayla's heart was hammering so violently she thought it might actually kill her. What should I call you then? Darius opened his mouth to respond. Then his hand went to his temple, pressing hard like he was fighting against something inside his skull that was trying to crush his brain. His face contorted with pain. I can't. There's something blocking. He staggered slightly, catching himself against the desk. Are you? Kayla started to move toward him instinctively. How touching. They both spun toward the door so fast Kayla nearly lost her balance. Queen Seraphine stood framed in the doorway like a portrait of cold perfection, pale blue silk gown that probably cost more than the entire servant's wing, blonde hair arranged in elaborate braids that must have taken hours, expression pleasant and warm and absolutely freezing underneath. Magic shimmered faintly around her, subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice, but visible to Kayla now that she knew to look for it. Like reality itself was bending slightly to accommodate her presence, making room for her in a way it didn't for normal people. I've been looking everywhere for you, darling, Seraphine said, her voice honey-sweet. Her gaze slid to Kayla, and the temperature in the room dropped at least 10 degrees. I see you've met our new cleaning girl, the queen continued. Kayla. Darius's voice was strained, still fighting whatever pain had grabbed him. Her name is Kayla. Is it? How sweet that you remembered. I can never keep track of servants' names. Seraphine glided into the room with the kind of effortless grace that spoke of a lifetime spent learning how to move like power embodied. Her hand landed on Darius's arm, possessive and territorial. You missed the afternoon council meeting, darling. Lord Garrett was quite concerned. I needed air, needed to clear my head. By interrogating Omega servants? Seraphine's laugh was light and musical and contained absolutely no genuine amusement whatsoever. How industrious of you. She turned to face Kayla directly, and there was nothing pleasant in her expression now, just pure, calculated threat barely concealed beneath aristocratic courtesy. You're dismissed. I'm sure there are floors somewhere in this enormous castle that need scrubbing. Kayla dropped into the lowest curtsy she could manage, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. Yes, my queen. She gathered her cleaning supplies quickly, trying not to look like she was fleeing even though that's exactly what she was doing. But Seraphine's voice stopped her before she could reach the door. Oh, and Kayla? The queen's smile was beautiful and absolutely terrifying in its cold precision. A word of advice from someone who cares about the well-being of all pack members. The collar you're wearing was placed there for a very specific reason. Omegas who forget their place, who overstep boundaries or try to manipulate their betters, tend to simply disappear, vanish without a trace. It would be such a tragedy if something unfortunate happened to you when you've already survived so much. The threat couldn't possibly have been clearer if Seraphine had pulled out a knife and held it to Kayla's throat. Kayla met those ice-blue eyes directly for just a moment and saw murder barely concealed beneath the pleasant facade. Real, genuine intent to kill if Kayla became enough of a problem. "I'll remember that, my queen," she said quietly, and meant it in ways Seraphine probably didn't intend. She left before the queen could say anything else, but not before catching Darius's gaze one final time. He looked confused, frustrated, angry, like a man trying desperately to solve a puzzle when half the pieces had been deliberately hidden and the other half didn't fit together properly, no matter how he arranged them. Perfect. Let him question everything. Let him doubt. Let the seed she'd carefully planted take root in the cracks of Seraphine's spell. She'd given him the thread. Now she just had to make sure he pulled it before Seraphine noticed and cut it. Kayla didn't go back to the servants' quarters like she was supposed to. Instead, she found herself climbing the narrow, winding stairs of the old keep, the original castle structure that had been built centuries ago, before the current elaborate palace had grown up around it like a jeweled shell around something simple and functional. Most people had completely forgotten the old keep existed. It was used for storage now, when it was used for anything at all, full of broken furniture nobody wanted to fix and moth-eaten tapestries too historically significant to throw away, but too damaged to display. Kayla had discovered it 5 years ago when she was desperately looking for places to hide and cry where nobody would find her, where the caller's magic would keep her invisible and forgotten. She climbed all the way to the top of the tower, her legs burning from the effort after 3 days of minimal food, and stepped out onto the parapet. Wind immediately hit her, sharp and cold, and carrying the distinct promise of winter coming. Below her, the kingdom spread out in absolutely every direction. Dark forests and golden fields, villages clustered along the silver ribbon of the river, distant mountains marking the northern border where Seraphine's homeland lay. Darius's kingdom, his responsibility, his burden, and Seraphine's playground, her carefully constructed web of lies and blood magic. Kayla gripped the cold stone parapet hard enough that her knuckles went white and let herself feel the absolute full weight of her rage. Not the quiet, swallowed anger that had kept her breathing and functioning through 5 years of servitude and humiliation. The real thing burning underneath, the kind of fury that burned hot enough to forge steel or burn entire cities to ash. Seraphine had stolen absolutely everything. Used blood magic that required human sacrifice to fuel it, rewritten reality itself, and now sat on a throne literally built from corpses and lies, while the real Luna scrubbed floors and pretended to be nobody. But all magic had rules. Always. Even blood magic, especially blood magic, the darkest and most powerful kind, demanded payment and followed patterns. Kayla just had to figure out what Seraphine had sacrificed to fuel the spell, find the physical anchor keeping it active, and destroy it before the queen realized what was happening and killed her. Simple. Dangerous place for an Omega to be standing alone. Kayla spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance, her heart leaping into her throat. A man stood at the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the fading light. Maybe 50 years old, with gray liberally streaking through dark hair, the kind of bearing that only came from spending an entire lifetime fighting. He wore simple clothes that were well made but deliberately understated, and the sword hanging at his hip looked like it had seen serious, brutal use over many years. "I was just," Kayla started, her mind racing through possible explanations. "Hiding," he finished for her, moving to lean against the parapet with the casual ease of someone who'd stood in this exact spot hundreds of times before. "I know. I've been doing the same thing myself for 5 years now." He glanced at her with sharp, assessing eyes. "Commander Theron, retired from active service, or exiled, depending on who you ask and what story they've been told." The name hit Kayla like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. "You were captain of the guard. You commanded the entire royal military." "I was," Theron agreed, his smile bitter and sharp-edged. "Right up until I started asking extremely inconvenient questions about our lovely new queen and where exactly she came from and why certain things about her story didn't add up properly. Funny how quickly loyal service becomes dangerous treason when the wrong people take power and rewrite the rules." Kayla stared at him, her mind spinning. You actually remember how things were before Seraphine arrived." Remember what specifically? The way things were. The way everything was different before she came and changed everything. Theron's expression shifted rapidly, surprise bleeding into something sharper and more dangerous. You're wearing a cursed collar specifically designed to suppress memory and identity. How in all the hells do you remember anything about before? I don't know, Kayla lied, the deception coming easily now after 5 years of practice. But I know something is fundamentally wrong. I can feel it in my bones. Nothing about the current situation makes sense. Wrong doesn't even begin to adequately cover it. Theron turned to face her fully, his gaze intense and searching. 5 years ago, I served an Alpha King who was strong and just, and occasionally politically stupid, but fundamentally decent at his core. Then the Northern Queen arrived for what was supposed to be a simple diplomatic visit, and within 6 months, everything had changed completely. Darius became cold, distant, made decisions that contradicted everything I knew about his character and values. When I started questioning it, started investigating quietly, I was given a very clear choice: accept exile or face execution for treason. You chose exile, Kayla said. I chose to stay alive long enough to figure out what the actual hell happened to my king and my kingdom. His jaw tightened. So tell me, Omega, what's your story? Why does someone wearing a suppression collar care about palace politics and magical conspiracies? Every instinct Kayla possessed screamed at her not to trust him, that this could be a trap, that Seraphine might have sent him to test her loyalties. But if Theron had been asking dangerous questions 5 years ago, if he'd been exiled for doubting Seraphine's story, if he still remembered when everyone else had forgotten, maybe she wasn't completely alone in this after all. The collar was placed on me 5 years ago, Kayla said carefully, measuring every word. The exact same time Seraphine arrived in the kingdom. Theron's eyes narrowed dangerously. That's not a coincidence. No, it's definitely not. You're planning something. Not a question. A statement of observed fact. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you're standing. Whatever it is, you're going to need help. Seraphine has eyes and ears absolutely everywhere in this castle. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Don't I? Theron's expression was strange, complicated. Tell me something. Did you ever spend time watching training sessions in the practice yards about 6 years ago, maybe? Kayla's breath caught. Sometimes. I used to watch from the gallery. Why? There was a young woman who came regularly. Omega designation, but she had fire in her that most alphas would envy. She'd sit in the gallery and take detailed notes on our formations and tactics, like she thought she might need to know them someday. His voice softened slightly. I remember her specifically because when the Alpha King started courting her, quietly, thinking nobody was paying attention, she didn't make it easy for him. Made him work for her attention. Made him prove he wanted her for more than just the convenience of the mate bond. Tears were burning behind Kayla's eyes, hot and desperate. You actually remember that. You remember her. I remember you, Kayla Thorne. Theron's voice was firm. And I remember the night you disappeared and how the next morning it was like you'd never existed at all. Everyone forgot. The servants, the nobles, even Darius himself. But I've always had an unusually thick skull when it comes to magic. Spells don't stick to me the way they're supposed to. I've spent 5 years remembering someone everyone else forgot. He stepped closer. So, yes, I'll help you, because someone needs to. And I'm too old and too angry to keep hiding in towers while that northern witch destroys everything I've spent my life protecting. She'll kill you if she finds out you're helping me, Kayla said. She's welcome to try. His smile was sharp and dangerous. But I didn't spend 40 years training warriors and commanding armies just to roll over for some magically enhanced usurper with delusions of permanent grandeur. For the first time in 5 desperately long years, something cracked open in Kayla's chest. Not breaking, opening, making room for something she genuinely thought was completely dead and gone. Hope. I need to understand the spell she used, Kayla said, her words coming faster now. Blood magic always requires an anchor, something physical keeping it active and feeding it power. If we can find it and destroy it, the false memories collapse and reality reasserts itself, Theron finished. It's a good theory, but she's still incredibly powerful even without the spell. Still queen, still has loyal followers, and you're still wearing that collar. Then we make her remove it, Kayla said. How exactly? The plan was forming even as she spoke, dangerous and desperate and probably suicidal, but actual and real. We make Darius remember the truth. Really remember, not just feel vague unease. The mate bond is still there. I felt it today when we were alone. The magic can suppress it, twist it, hide it under layers of false memory, but it can't actually destroy it. Bonds like that are too fundamental. If we can break through the interference long enough for him to truly feel what's real, the bond will do the rest of the work itself, Theron finished, nodding slowly. It's completely insane. Do you have a better idea? Not even remotely. He held out his hand, scarred from decades of sword work. I'm in, but we do this smart and careful. One wrong move, one slip, and Seraphine will bury both of us so deep nobody will ever find the bodies. Kayla took his hand. His grip was strong, solid, real. One question before we start, Theron said. I need to know what's driving you. Are you doing this for revenge against Seraphine? Or are you doing it for Darius? The question hit harder than Kayla had expected, cutting right to the core of motivations she hadn't fully examined. She thought about this girl she'd been 6 years ago, hopeful, naive, desperately in love, and believing that love could conquer politics. Then she thought about the woman she'd become, scarred inside and out, furious, forged in 5 years of humiliation and survival and rage. Both, she said finally, honestly. I want my life back. I want justice for what was stolen. But I also want to watch Seraphine burn for every single thing she's done. Is that wrong? Wrong. Theron's laugh was harsh and genuine. Girl, it's the most honest and human thing I've heard anyone say in 5 years. They stood together on the parapet as the sun finally set completely, painting the kingdom in shades of blood and gold and shadow. Below them, the castle prepared for night, torches being lit in regular patterns, gates being closed and barred, guards changing shifts, the eternal rhythm of power and service continuing its endless cycle. But up here in the forgotten tower where nobody ever looked, where the collar's magic made Kayla invisible and Theron's exile made him irrelevant, a discarded Omega and an exiled commander were making plans that would shake a kingdom's foundations down to bedrock. Seraphine had made one absolutely critical mistake 5 years ago. She'd left Kayla alive. And now, with Theron's tactical mind and military contacts, with doubt planted firmly in Darius's mind and growing, with 5 years of carefully banked rage finally finding a useful outlet, now Kayla was going to make the false queen regret that decision with every fiber of her being. The collar pulsed against her throat, warm and hateful, a constant reminder of what had been stolen. For the first time, Kayla smiled back at it, because chains only held you if you let them define you, and she was completely done being held. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in walking the edge of a knife while pretending you weren't bleeding. Kayla cleaned the library every evening, arriving precisely at sunset when Darius would be finishing council meetings and looking for somewhere quiet to think. She learned his patterns the way a hunter learns prey, not to kill, but to understand. How he'd enter exhausted and pour himself whiskey from the crystal decanter, but barely touch it, just hold the glass like the weight was comforting. How he'd stare at maps spread across his desk for 20 minutes without moving, like the answer to whatever was bothering him might appear if he looked hard enough. How he'd pick up a book and read the same page 3 times without absorbing a single word. How his hand would drift unconsciously to his chest when she was in the room, pressing against his sternum like he was trying to hold something in. Or maybe keep something out. She never spoke first, never lingered longer than her tasks required. Did her work with quiet efficiency and left before Seraphine could manufacture excuses to appear and make thinly veiled threats about Omega servants who forgot their place. But she made absolutely certain Darius noticed her presence. A book he'd been searching for, suddenly appearing on his desk, returned to exactly the right spot. His favorite leather chair positioned perfectly to catch the firelight. Coffee still hot when he arrived, prepared the way he preferred it, even though she shouldn't know his preferences. Small gestures that someone who genuinely cared would know. Small details that a stranger playing a role wouldn't think to include. Meanwhile, Theron was gathering information through channels he refused to fully explain, no matter how many times Kayla asked. Old military contacts who owed him favors from decades of service. Servants who remembered strange fragments of before despite the spell's grip on their minds. Minor nobles who'd always found Seraphine's sudden appearance and marriage suspicious but had been too afraid to voice concerns. He'd meet Kayla in the tower at midnight, usually smelling like cheap tavern ale and wood smoke, and share what he'd learned in terse, careful sentences. "The spell's anchor isn't in the castle," he said one night about 2 weeks in, frustration evident in every line of his weathered face. "I've had trusted people searching every wing, every hidden room, every place where dark magic might be concealed. Whatever Seraphine used to fuel the blood magic, she's keeping it somewhere else entirely." "Or someone else is keeping it for her," Kayla said slowly, the thought crystallizing as she spoke it. Theron looked at her sharply, his soldier's eyes narrowing. "Explain that theory." "Blood magic requires sacrifice. Living sacrifice, usually. Someone close to the caster has to willingly participate, has to maintain the spell through their own life force." Kayla had spent every spare moment over the past weeks reading every book on dark magic she could steal from the library's restricted section, smuggling them out page by page. Seraphine came from the north with a full retinue. Ladies-in-waiting, advisors, personal guards. What if one of them is the anchor, just walking around the castle, keeping the spell active through their presence, through their breathing? "That's—" Theron stopped, his expression shifting from skepticism to horrified understanding. "Actually brilliant in a completely twisted way, and it would explain several things that haven't made sense." "Like what?" "Like why the magic feels so stable even after 5 years. Most blood spells degrade over time without constant reinforcement. But if the anchor is a living person constantly present, constantly feeding it," he swore under his breath, "we need to figure out who in Seraphine's inner circle has been with her since the very beginning, who never leaves the castle grounds, who she keeps closest at all times." "Lady Morgana," Kayla said immediately. The name had been nagging at her for days. "Her primary attendant. I've been watching. She's been at Seraphine's side every single day since I started working the North Wing. Eats with her, sleeps in the adjoining chamber, accompanies her to every meeting and social function." "Then that's where we start," Theron agreed. "But we need to be careful. If Morgana is the anchor and Seraphine realizes we're getting close, she'll move her or eliminate the evidence. Or eliminate us. She's already threatened to eliminate me." Theron's jaw tightened. "When?" "2 days ago. Told me to request reassignment away from the library or I'd disappear permanently." "And you're still going there every night?" "Of course I am." Kayla pulled her stolen blanket tighter against the tower's bitter cold. "We're running out of time. Darius is starting to remember things. Not everything, not clearly, but fragments. He knows something's wrong with his memories. If we can just push him a little further, if you push too hard, Seraphine will kill you before he remembers enough to stop her," Theron interrupted. "You're playing an incredibly dangerous game." "I know, but it's the only game we have." Surveillance on Lady Morgana proved harder than either of them had anticipated. The woman was a ghost by design, moving through the castle in Seraphine's shadow, rarely speaking, never alone. Kayla tried watching her during the few times she ventured into public spaces, but Morgana was aggressively unremarkable. Plain brown hair pulled back in a simple style, forgettable features that your eyes slid right past, clothes that were expensive but deliberately understated. The kind of person you'd look at directly and still not remember 5 minutes later. Just like Kayla herself, thanks to the caller's magic. Maybe that was precisely the point. Hide in plain sight by being completely unmemorable. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week, entirely by accident. Kayla was leaving the library later than usual. Darius had stayed working until nearly midnight, and she'd waited in the corridor until he finally left before going in to bank the fires. She was cutting through the servant passages when she heard voices echoing from somewhere ahead. Female voices, low and urgent. She pressed herself against the stone wall and listened. "Can't maintain it much longer. The pain is getting worse." That was Morgana's voice, strained in a way Kayla had never heard before. "You'll maintain it as long as I require." Seraphine, cold and absolute. "We're too close to risk the spell degrading now." "It's been 5 years. My lady, please. The marks are spreading. Soon they'll be visible even through clothing, and if anyone sees, no one will see. You'll make certain of that." A pause. Unless you'd prefer I find a new anchor. The spell would require your death to transfer properly, but that can certainly be arranged. Silence. Then Morgana's voice, small and defeated. No, my lady, I'll continue. Good. Now go rest. We have the treaty signing tomorrow, and I need you presentable. Footsteps approached. Kayla barely made it around the corner before Seraphine swept past, her expression thoughtful and cold. Morgana followed a moment later, walking slowly like every step hurt. Kayla waited until they were both gone, then ran for the tower. She's definitely the anchor, Kayla told Theron breathlessly when she found him waiting in their usual spot. I heard them talking. Morgana said the marks are spreading, that maintaining the spell is causing her pain. Seraphine threatened to kill her and transfer the anchor if she complained. Did you see these marks? No. But Morgana said they'd be visible through clothing soon, which means they must be extensive, covering more than just her wrists. Theron was quiet for a long moment, thinking. If we can expose the marks publicly, in front of the pack, it would be undeniable proof of blood magic. Even Seraphine couldn't explain that away. How do we expose them? Morgana never leaves Seraphine's side. We create a situation where she has to. Theron's smile was sharp and dangerous. Leave that part to me. You focus on keeping Darius questioning. We need him ready to believe the truth when we reveal it. That conversation with Darius came sooner than Kayla expected. She was polishing the library windows the next evening, standing on a small ladder, when his voice cut through the quiet. You're different from the other servants. Kayla looked down. He was standing near the desk, still wearing his formal council clothes, watching her with an intensity that made the bond pull hard in her chest. My lord? She said carefully. Don't. He moved closer to the ladder, and she had to grip the frame to keep from swaying. Don't do that thing where you pretend to be nobody. I've been watching you for 3 weeks now. You move through this room like you know it intimately, like you've been here before, many times before. I clean it every day, my lord. That's not what I mean, and you know it. He was directly below her now, looking up, and the bond was screaming at her to climb down to close the distance. 3 weeks ago, you said I should ask Seraphine about what really happened 5 years ago. That's been eating at me. Why would you say something so dangerous unless you believed it absolutely? Kayla's hands were shaking on the window frame. I was speaking out of turn. You were telling me the truth. Darius's gray eyes were intense, searching her face like he was trying to solve an equation with missing variables. Or at least you believe it's the truth, which means either you're dangerously delusional or something is fundamentally wrong with my memories, and I'm starting to think it's not the first option. This was it, the moment she'd been carefully building toward. What do you remember about 5 years ago? Kayla asked quietly. That's exactly the problem. I don't remember clearly. Not really. His frustration was palpable, radiating off him in waves. I remember Seraphine arriving for a diplomatic visit. I remember the wedding happening very quickly, much faster than my father wanted. I remember her being crowned. But before all that, the months leading up to her arrival? It's like trying to grab smoke with my bare hands. I know things must have happened, but I can't see them clearly, can't hold on to specific details. And that doesn't strike you as deeply strange? Everything strikes me as strange lately. He reached up and offered his hand to help her down from the ladder. She hesitated, knowing the caller would react to his touch, but he kept his hand extended patiently. Especially you. When you're in this room, I feel like I should know you. Not just know your name, but know everything about you. Where you came from, what makes you laugh, what you look like when you first wake up. The bond was pulling so hard now that Kayla's chest physically ached with it. She placed her hand in his, and the collar pulsed once but didn't shock them. The sustained contact over weeks had somehow dulled its defensive response. She stepped down from the ladder, and suddenly they were standing very close. My lord, Darius. The word came out rough, almost desperate. When we're alone like this, just say my name, please. I need to hear you say it. It was a mistake. She knew it was a mistake. Every strategic instinct screamed at her to maintain distance, but she said it anyway. Darius! He inhaled sharply like the sound had physically struck him. His free hand came up to cup her face, and his eyes were wild. Again, say it again. Darius? I know you, he whispered, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I know you and I can't remember how, and it's driving me completely insane. Who are you really? What were you to me? The door slammed open with enough force to crack against the wall. Seraphine stood framed in the doorway, and the rage in her ice-blue eyes was barely concealed beneath a paper-thin layer of courtly civility. "Darling," she said, and her voice was sugary, sweet poison. "Lord Castor is here for your meeting." Darius's hands dropped from Kayla's face, but he didn't step back. "I didn't have any meeting scheduled with Castor." "You did. I arranged it this morning while you were training." Seraphine's smile could have cut glass. "You've been so forgetful lately, missing appointments, losing track of time. Such a good thing I'm here to remember these details for you." The implication was clear as crystal. She knew exactly what had almost happened, and she was reminding Darius who controlled his schedule, his memories, his life. "Of course," Darius said, his voice carefully neutral, even though Kayla could see his jaw tighten. "Thank you for the reminder." He left without looking back at Kayla, though she felt the bond stretch and protest the distance. Seraphine lingered, closing the door with deliberate, controlled care. The moment it clicked shut, her pleasant expression evaporated completely. "You're playing a very dangerous game, little Omega." Kayla kept her eyes down, hands clasped, the picture of submission. "I'm just cleaning, my queen. You're planting doubts in his mind, whispering poison in his ear, standing too close, touching him, making him question things he shouldn't question." Seraphine moved closer, and the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Frost actually formed on the nearest window. "I've been patient because removing you too obviously would raise inconvenient questions. But my patience has very definite limits. I haven't done anything wrong. You exist. That's enough." Seraphine's hand shot out faster than a snake strike, gripping Kayla's chin hard enough to bruise and forcing her head up. The contact made the collar pulse with searing heat that made Kayla gasp. "I could kill you right now, right here in this room. Make it look like a tragic accident. Who would question the death of a collared Omega servant? Who would even remember you died?" Kayla met those ice-blue eyes and saw genuine, calculated murder there. "No one," she whispered. "Exactly." Seraphine released her with enough force that Kayla stumbled backward into the bookshelf. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop cleaning this wing entirely. Tomorrow morning, you're going to request reassignment to the kitchens or the stables or anywhere that keeps you far away from my husband. And you're going to forget these little intimate conversations ever happened." "And if I don't?" Seraphine's smile was beautiful and utterly terrifying. "Then you'll simply disappear. And this time, I'll make absolutely certain there's nothing left for anyone to remember. No body, no grave, no trace that you ever existed at all." She swept from the room in a whisper of expensive silk, leaving Kayla shaking and the scent of dark magic lingering in the air. That night, Kayla climbed to the tower to find Theron already waiting, pacing like a caged wolf. "We're completely out of time," she said without preamble. "Seraphine knows I'm getting too close to Darius. She directly threatened to kill me if I don't request reassignment." "Then we move tonight. Right now." Theron's expression was grim as death. "I found something this afternoon. One of my contacts saw Lady Morgana visiting the old temple ruins outside the north wall. Middle of the night, 3 nights ago, carrying something wrapped in black cloth." "The ruins? Nobody's used those in decades. They're completely abandoned." Exactly. Which makes them absolutely perfect for hiding something you desperately don't want found. Theron pulled out a rough map sketched on parchment. "There's an entrance through the old catacombs that run under the wall. We go tonight, we find what she's hiding, and we bring it back as evidence. We don't even know what we're looking for. We'll know it when we see it. Blood magic has a distinctive signature, a feeling in the air, a smell, a visual wrongness." His eyes were hard with remembered violence. "Trust me. I've seen enough dark magic and 40 years of military service to recognize it instantly." Kayla nodded, her heart pounding. "Tonight, then, after midnight." But she never made it to the catacombs. Marissa found her before sunset, her weathered face pinched with something that might have been concern or might have been satisfaction. It was genuinely impossible to tell. "You're to report to the throne room immediately," the head of household said. "The Alpha King has called an emergency assembly of the entire pack. Everyone of rank is required to attend." Kayla's blood went ice cold. "What's happened?" "Just go, and stay in the servants' section in the back. Don't draw attention. The throne room was absolutely packed when Kayla slipped in through the servants' entrance, pressing herself against the back wall. Every noble, every high-ranking pack member, every warrior of any significance. The guards lined the walls in formal position, hands on weapons. The air was thick with tension and wild speculation. Darius sat on his throne looking like he'd aged 10 years in a single day, his face carved from stone. Seraphine beside him, looking perfectly serene. And kneeling in the center of the room, hands bound behind his back with iron chains, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye, was Theron. Kayla's entire world tilted sideways. No, 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 no. This wasn't supposed to happen. Commander Theron, Darius's voice rang out, formal and cold and wrong. You stand accused of treason against the crown, of conspiring to undermine lawful authority and spread dangerous sedition among pack members. That's complete bullshit, Theron spat, blood flying from his split lip. And you know it, boy. You know exactly what's really happening here. I know that multiple witnesses have come forward with testimony. Darius's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. I know that evidence has been formally presented to the council. I know that you've been meeting secretly with a collared Omega servant, filling her head with lies and conspiracy theories about the Queen. Every eye in the room turned to search the crowd for this mysterious Omega. But the collar's magic kept them sliding right past Kayla, unable to focus, unable to see. Every eye except Seraphine's. The Queen knew exactly where Kayla stood, and her smile was triumphant. The penalty for treason is execution, Darius continued, and something in his voice sounded completely hollow, like he was reading words someone else had written. However, the law allows for mercy if the accused recants publicly. Commander Theron, you may avoid execution if you swear loyalty to the crown and to Queen Seraphine and renounce your seditious claims. Theron's laugh was harsh and bitter. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees pledging loyalty to that northern witch. The room exploded into shocked murmurs. Seraphine stood smoothly, her movements liquid grace. Then you'll certainly get your wish, Commander. But first, let's discuss who's been helping you spread these dangerous lies. This Omega you've been meeting with in secret. Where is she? What's her name? The question hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Kayla's breath stopped completely. If Seraphine identified her publicly, if she called her out by name in front of the entire assembled pack, the caller's protection would shatter. Everyone would see her, remember her, and then Seraphine could claim she'd been the one conspiring all along, manipulating Darius, corrupting loyal servants like Theron. It would be the perfect way to eliminate her permanently while looking like justice. I worked alone, Theron said firmly, meeting Seraphine's eyes with defiance. You're lying to your queen. Seraphine's power flared visibly, making the air shimmer like heat haze. Tell me her name, now. There's no name, there's no Omega, just an old fool asking questions nobody wanted to hear. Seraphine's eyes narrowed dangerously. Then she smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Kayla had ever seen. Very well. If you won't tell me voluntarily, perhaps we'll use other methods of extracting truth. She raised both hands, and Kayla saw the spell forming, dark magic coalescing into something vicious and invasive. It would tear into Theron's mind, rip through his memories and thoughts, until it found exactly what Seraphine wanted. And there was no surviving that kind of magical assault. Even if he didn't break and tell her everything, the spell would leave him a mindless shell. Kayla had maybe 5 seconds to decide. Stay hidden. Let Theron die protecting her identity. Keep her cover intact and continue the slow, careful plan they'd built. Or act now, blow absolutely everything to hell, and hope she could survive whatever came next. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Stop! Kayla stepped forward out of the crowd, and the caller's magic shattered like glass hitting stone. Suddenly, every single eye in the room could see her, really see her, clearly and completely. And more than that, memories were crashing back, fragments of recognition fighting viciously against 5 years of magical suppression. Servants who'd known her before, guards who'd seen her walking with Darius in the gardens, nobles who'd watched the young Alpha King court in Omega. Everyone had somehow forgotten existed. The room erupted into absolute chaos. Who is that? I remember her. How do I remember her? Wasn't she supposed to be? Where has she been for 5 years? Darius stood abruptly, his face completely white like he'd seen a ghost. Kayla? Her name in his mouth, spoken with recognition finally, nearly broke her. Seraphine's expression transformed from cold satisfaction to pure incandescent rage in less than a second. You! The word was venomous. You should be dead. I made certain you'd stay broken and forgotten. But I'm not dead. Kayla walked forward, her legs shaking, but her voice steady. 5 years you've kept me collared and silent and invisible. 5 years you've made everyone forget I existed. But I remember everything, Seraphine, every detail, every crime. And now so will they. The collar pulsed violently, trying desperately to reimpose the forgetting, but something fundamental had broken in the spell. The magic was cracking like ice over a frozen lake. She's the one, Seraphine announced loudly, recovering with impressive speed. The delusional Omega who tried to seduce our king 6 years ago, who claimed a false mate bond to elevate her worthless position, who's been corrupting Commander Theron with lies and manipulation, trying to undermine the crown. The bond isn't false. Kayla turned to face Darius directly, and the connection between them flared so bright it was almost visible. You feel it right now, don't you? That pull in your chest, that recognition screaming at you. You felt it every single time we've been alone together because blood magic can hide memories, but it absolutely cannot destroy a true mate bond. Darius's hand was pressed hard against his sternum, his breathing ragged and uneven. I can't think clearly. You wrote about me in your journal. Kayla's voice carried through the stunned silence. 6 years ago, before Seraphine came and made you forget, you wrote that the mate bond was driving you insane, that when you were with me, everything else disappeared, that I made you feel like you were real, like you were more than just the throne. That's enough, Seraphine snapped, her power flaring brighter and more dangerous. Guards! Seize her immediately! Nobody moved. The pack members were too busy remembering, too busy trying to reconcile 5 years of false reality with fragments of truth fighting their way back to the surface. You used blood magic, Kayla continued, speaking faster now, knowing she had minutes at most before Seraphine decided to just kill her outright. You sacrificed innocent people to fuel a spell that rewrote everyone's memories, made them forget I existed, made Darius believe you were his true mate instead of me, made yourself queen through murder and dark magic. Prove it, Seraphine said coldly, but there was an edge of panic underneath now. You have absolutely no proof, just the desperate, jealous claims of a broken Omega who can't accept her proper place in the hierarchy. Lady Morgana, Theron called from where he still knelt in chains, blood running down his face, but his voice strong. Check Lady Morgana for the anchor marks. Blood magic this extensive always leaves a distinctive signature on the person actively maintaining it. Seraphine's eyes went wide with genuine fear. You're completely insane, she said, but her voice shook. Then you won't mind if we verify the claim, Darius said quietly. His voice was strange, distant, like he was fighting through thick fog. Morgana, come here, now. The plain woman in Seraphine's shadow tried to run. She actually made it 3 full steps toward the door before guards caught her, dragging her back to the center of the throne room. She was screaming, high-pitched and desperate and terrified. Show me your wrists, Darius commanded, his voice taking on the absolute authority of an Alpha King issuing a direct order. Morgana thrashed violently, but the guards forced her arms out straight, and there, on both inner wrists, were marks. Circular patterns burned deep into the skin, black and red and still visibly pulsing with active power. The throne room exploded into noise like a bomb detonating. Blood magic. The queen used blood magic. How many people did she kill? How long has this been? Seraphine's carefully maintained composure completely shattered. You don't understand what you're seeing. I did it for us, for the kingdom, for the stability. You did it for power, Kayla said, her voice cutting through the chaos. And you murdered innocent people to get it. How many, Seraphine? How many people died screaming to fuel your spell? Silence! Seraphine's power detonated outward in a shockwave, knocking half the room to their knees. Only Darius remained standing, and Kayla, somehow protected by the mate bond, fighting against the caller's remaining magic. You think exposing this changes anything? I am queen. I have been queen for 5 years. I have power. I have loyal followers. I have built this kingdom into something stronger than it ever was. The pack is mine. The pack was built on lies and corpses, Darius said, and his voice was shaking with barely controlled fury. You made me forget her. Made me forget. He staggered, pressing both hands to his head like something was trying to tear its way out of his skull. I loved her. I remember it now. I loved her, and you burned that out of my mind and replaced it with yourself. The mate bond between them suddenly flared to full strength, no longer suppressed by the collar or Seraphine's magic. And Kayla gasped as the complete weight of it hit her. 5 years of separation, of pain, of longing, of loss, all of it crashed through both of them simultaneously like a tidal wave. Darius's eyes met hers across the throne room, and she saw recognition finally, fully, completely bloom there. Not just remembering her name, remembering everything, every moment, every conversation, every promise they'd made. Kayla, he breathed, and her name in his mouth was a prayer and an apology and a declaration all at once. Seraphine screamed in pure rage and raised both hands, dark magic coalescing into something absolutely lethal aimed directly at Kayla's heart. The collar exploded, not cracked or damaged. Exploded into hundreds of fragments that scattered across the throne room floor like deadly rain. Kayla's wolf surged back to full consciousness for the first time in 5 brutal years, and the sensation was overwhelming, strength flooding back into her limbs, her senses sharpening to painful clarity, the pack link snapping into place with such force it almost knocked her down. She was whole again, finally whole. Seraphine's killing spell hit her and shattered harmlessly against the mate bond's protection like water against stone. No, the false queen whispered, her face twisted with disbelief. No, you were supposed to stay broken forever. I was never broken, Kayla said, and her voice carried her wolf's power now, just waiting for the right moment to bite back. Darius moved then, finally, stepping down from his throne with lethal purpose. Seraphine, I, Darius Blackmore, Alpha King of this pack and these territories, formally and completely reject you. You are not my mate. You are not my queen. You are nothing to me or this pack. The rejection hit Seraphine like a physical blow, breaking whatever remaining magical connection she'd forged. She stumbled backward, her power flickering and guttering like a candle in wind. You can't. The bond we built was false from the very beginning. A lie built on murder. Darius's eyes were hard as stone. I have one true mate, and she's been here all along, suffering because of your ambition. The throne room was utterly, perfectly silent. Then Seraphine did something absolutely no one expected. She laughed, high and desperate and completely, utterly unhinged. You think this is over? You think exposing me here in this room ends anything? She backed toward the tall windows, dark magic swirling around her in increasingly chaotic patterns. I've spent 5 years building power in this kingdom. I have followers scattered throughout your territories. I have allies in the north who owe me everything. I have magic you can't even imagine. This isn't over, Darius. This is just the beginning of what's coming. She raised her hands, and the window exploded outward in a shower of glass. Guards rushed forward, but by the time they reached the opening, she'd vanished completely into the night. Gone, leaving only the echo of her laughter and the lingering, nauseating stench of blood magic hanging heavy in the air. Kayla's legs gave out. She hit the floor hard, her body shaking uncontrollably, her newly freed wolf howling in her head with 5 years of suppressed emotion. Too much. Everything was too much all at once. Then Darius was there, dropping to his knees beside her, his hands on her face with desperate gentleness. I'm sorry, he said, and he was crying openly. I'm so sorry, I forgot you. I let her do this to you. I should have fought harder, should have known something was wrong. It wasn't your fault, Kayla managed through her own tears. The magic was too strong. You couldn't have... I should have known. Somehow, I should have known. He pulled her close, and the bond sang between them, whole and true, and finally acknowledged. I'm here now. I'm here, and I'm never forgetting you again. Never. Kayla buried her face in his shoulder and let herself break, just for a moment. But even as Darius held her, even as the pack erupted into chaos and questions and demands for answers around them, even as Theron was being freed from his chains, Kayla knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't the end of anything. Seraphine was still out there, still powerful, still dangerous, still commanding resources and allies they didn't fully understand. and she'd promised this was just beginning. The war they'd started tonight was far from over. It had only just begun. The castle didn't sleep that night. Kayla sat in what had once been Seraphine's private chambers, now being systematically stripped by servants who worked with grim satisfaction, and watched torches move through the grounds below like angry fireflies. Search parties looking for any trace of where the false queen had vanished to. Guards doubled at every entrance, every gate, every possible exit. Messengers riding hard into the darkness to alert neighboring territories that their queen had been exposed as a fraud and was now a dangerous fugitive. The room still smelled like Seraphine's perfume, jasmine and something darker underneath. It made Kayla's newly freed wolf snarl with territorial aggression. "You should rest," Darius said from the doorway. He'd been hovering for the past 3 hours, unable to stay away for more than 5 minutes at a stretch, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he stopped watching her. "Can't." Kayla turned from the window. Her entire body felt wrong, good wrong, but still disorienting. 5 years of magical suppression lifting all at once left her overwhelmed. Every sound too loud, every scent too sharp, the pack link buzzing in her head like 1,000 conversations happening simultaneously. "Too much happening in my brain. My wolf won't settle." "I know the feeling." He moved into the room properly, and even now, especially now, the mate bond pulled between them like a physical rope. 5 years of forced separation made the connection almost painfully intense. "The council wants to meet at dawn. They have questions." "About me." "About everything." Darius sat on the edge of the ornate bed, looking older than his years, exhausted. "How Seraphine fooled us for 5 years. The blood magic. What happened to you? What we do now. Who we can trust." He ran a hand through his hair. "Lord Garrett is already making noise about needing proof that you're really my true mate. That this isn't just another manipulation." Kayla's stomach clenched. "Of course he is. He's scared. They all are. Their entire reality just got rewritten in the span of an hour." Darius looked at her with eyes full of guilt. "I told them the truth. That I was an idiot who let dark magic blind him. That I forgot my mate and let her suffer while I played house with a murderer." "Darius." "Don't." He stood abruptly. "Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. I'm Alpha King. My job is protecting the pack, and I failed so completely I couldn't even protect the one person who should have mattered most." "The magic was specifically designed to make you forget. Seraphine killed people to make it strong enough to rewrite reality." Kayla moved closer to him. "You couldn't have fought that alone. Nobody could have. I should have tried harder. Should have questioned why my memories felt wrong. Should have—" He stopped, his hand pressing against his chest where the bond pulsed. "When everything came back tonight all at once, I thought it would kill me, remembering what we had, what I felt, and then realizing what I let happen to you while I was with her." "You're here now," Kayla said quietly, taking his hand. "That's what matters." "Is it?" His gray eyes were full of pain that made her chest ache. 5 years, Kayla. 5 years you scrubbed floors and starved and wore that cursed collar while I slept 20 feet away and didn't even know you existed. How do I make that right? How do I even begin? She didn't have an answer, wasn't sure there was one that would satisfy either of them. A knock interrupted before she could try to find words. Theron entered without waiting for permission, his face freshly bandaged and his expression carved from stone. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Actually, we have about 20 problems, but one requires immediate attention." Darius was instantly alert. "What happened?" "Morgana's dead. Servants found her in her chambers 15 minutes ago. Throat cut, bled out across the floor." Theron's jaw was tight with barely controlled fury. The blood magic anchor marks were carved off her wrists post-mortem. Whoever killed her took the skin. Ice slid down Kayla's spine. Seraphine came back. That's my assessment. Came back for the evidence, eliminated the witness, took the anchor marks with her. Theron moved to the window, checking the grounds below with a soldier's paranoid precision. Which means she was inside the castle within the last hour, and she's desperate enough to commit murder to cover her tracks. "The castle's completely locked down," Darius said. "Every entrance is guarded. She couldn't have gotten back in without being seen. She escaped through a second-story window using magic powerful enough to shatter stone," Theron pointed out flatly. "You think locked doors are going to stop her now?" So what do we do? Kayla asked. We assume she's still here somewhere, still extremely dangerous, and still has access to blood magic that makes her significantly more powerful than any of us individually. Theron turned from the window. And we accept that the council meeting at dawn is going to be a perfect opportunity for her to strike if she wants both of you dead in one move. Let her come, Darius said, his voice hard as iron. I'm done running from this. Spoken like someone who's never actually fought a blood mage in combat. Theron's expression was severe. I have. Northern campaigns 23 years ago. You don't fight them head on. You lose every time. They have power we can't match through conventional means. You fight them smart, or you die screaming. How do we fight smart? Kayla asked. You take away their power source. Blood magic requires an anchor, a living person channeling life force to maintain complex spells. Theron pulled out a piece of parchment from his jacket, blood-stained and creased. I managed to sketch the marks on Morgana's wrists before whoever killed her removed them. These symbols are old magic. Northern tradition, probably older than our kingdom. Specifically designed to channel continuous life force into spell maintenance. Kayla studied the sketch. The circular patterns were intricate, almost beautiful in their geometric precision, and fundamentally viscerally wrong in a way that made her wolf want to destroy the paper itself. If the anchor dies, what happens to the spell? She asked. It collapses. Everyone Seraphine-influenced gets their real memories back simultaneously. Theron grimaced. It's not pleasant. I've seen it happen once. Most people pass out from the cognitive shock. Some have seizures, but they survive, and they remember the truth. The spell dies permanently, Darius said slowly. No way to restart it. Correct. But here's the critical problem. Seraphine knows this better than we do. She understands the mechanics intimately. Theron tapped the sketch. Which means she either needs to create a new living anchor immediately, or she needs to modify the existing spell structure to function without one. Both options require significant additional power. More deaths, Kayla said quietly. Almost certainly. More blood sacrifice to fuel the magic. Theron met her eyes grimly. Which is why we need to find her before she can complete either option. Fast. The council meeting at dawn was tension-wrapped in barely maintained civility. Every high-ranking pack member crammed into the great hall, filling the space with body heat and raised voices and the sharp scent of fear disguised as anger. All of them talking at once, demanding answers and explanations, and proof of things they could barely comprehend. 5 years of comfortable false reality crashing violently into complicated truth had left everyone disoriented and looking for someone to blame. Kayla stood beside Darius at the head table, acutely aware of how every single eye in the room kept tracking to her. Some with dawning recognition as suppressed memories fought their way back, others with open suspicion, a few with outright hostility that made her wolf bare its teeth internally. She changed into proper clothing, a deep blue gown that had been hastily altered to fit her, nothing like the servant rags she'd worn for 5 years. But she still felt exposed, wrong, like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Order! Darius called, his alpha voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent immediately, decades of ingrained hierarchy overriding panic. I understand you all have questions. I'll answer what I can. Is it true? Lord Castor stood, his weathered face carved with confusion and something that might have been grief. About the blood magic? About Queen Seraphine using dark spells to manipulate the entire pack? Yes. She used magic fueled by human sacrifice to alter memories across the kingdom and claim the throne through deception. The room erupted again, voices overlapping, some shouting, others speaking in frantic whispers. Darius let it run for exactly 30 seconds before calling for silence again. The Omega. Lady Brennan stood, her sharp eyes fixed on Kayla with undisguised skepticism. You claim she's your true mate. That Seraphine made you forget her. How do we know this isn't just another deception, another trick? The mate bond is real, Darius said firmly. Everyone present in the throne room last night felt it when the cursed collar shattered. The power release was undeniable. Omegas can manufacture false bonds with the right magical assistance, someone called from the back of the hall. How do we know she hasn't done exactly that? Not like what we witnessed, Theron interjected, standing from his seat near the front. I've served this pack for 42 years. I was captain of the guard under the previous Alpha King. I knew Kayla Thorne before Seraphine ever arrived in this kingdom. I watched Alpha King Darius court her properly. I watched them fall in love like civilized people do. And I watched that northern witch burn it all away with blood magic and murder. You were formally accused of treason yesterday, Lord Garrett pointed out coldly. Your testimony is suspect at best. Accused by the woman we now know was using dark magic to control the entire kingdom, yes. Theron's voice could have cut steel. She wanted me silenced because I was asking questions she couldn't answer. Questions about where she came from, why her story had inconsistencies, why certain records didn't align with her claims.
This is insane, Lady Brennan said, but her voice shook slightly. You're asking us to believe our Queen of 5 Years is actually a murderer and a fraud, and this Omega we don't remember is actually Luna, Kayla said quietly. Every head in the room turned to stare at her. She took a breath and spoke louder, letting her newly freed wolf add power to her voice. I am Luna of this pack. I was chosen by the mate bond 6 years ago. I would have been crowned and formally recognized if Seraphine hadn't stolen my place with blood magic and systematic murder. Convenient that you remember this clearly now, Garrett said with obvious skepticism. After 5 years of complete silence. I was collared with cursed silver specifically designed to suppress my wolf and make everyone forget my existence. You included, Lord Garrett. Kayla met his eyes steadily, refusing to look away. You used to bring me books from your personal library, military histories and battle strategy. You said I had an unusually good tactical mind for an Omega, and it shouldn't be wasted. Garrett's face went absolutely white. His hand came up to his temple like something had just struck him. I remember that. How do I remember that? Why am I just now? Because the spell is actively breaking now that its primary anchor is dead, Theron explained. You're all going to start remembering things Seraphine forced you to forget. Memories will return in fragments, often triggered by specific details or conversations. It won't be pleasant or comfortable. As if his words had summoned the effect, several pack members around the room suddenly gasped or went rigid in their seats. Kayla watched memories hit them like physical blows, bodies jerking, hands gripping table edges, faces contorting with pain or confusion or dawning horror. A woman near the back started crying openly. A guard stationed by the door dropped to his knees, both hands pressed hard against his temples. What's happening to them? Someone shouted, panic threading through the words. Their real memories are fighting back to the surface, Kayla said, keeping her voice calm even though her heart was racing. Everything Seraphine buried with magic is trying to return all at once. It's overwhelming but not dangerous. Make it stop, Lady Brennan demanded, though her own voice had started shaking. Her face had gone pale as a memory clearly struck her too. Make it stop right now. We can't, Darius said. The spell is collapsing on its own without an anchor maintaining it. The memories will return whether we want them to or not. You're remembering the truth. The Great Hall descended into barely controlled chaos. People remembering fragments of before, struggling to reconcile 5 years of false reality with what had actually happened. Some looked angry, fists clenched and voices rising. Others appeared physically sick, green-tinged and swaying. A few seemed almost relieved, like they'd known something was fundamentally wrong but couldn't articulate what until now. Kayla was watching Lord Castor's face cycle through confusion to recognition to absolute horror when the temperature in the room suddenly dropped at least 20 degrees. Every breath became immediately visible as frost. Ice formed on the windows in crystalline patterns. How touching, Seraphine's voice rang out from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. A reunion. Everyone remembering the good old days before I improved everything. Guards drew weapons immediately, scanning every corner of the room, but there was no visible source for the voice. Show yourself, Darius commanded, his voice carrying absolute alpha authority. Laughter echoed off stone walls and vaulted ceilings. Then Seraphine materialized at the far end of the hall, standing on empty air approximately 6 feet above the ground. Her blonde hair was wild and matted. Her expensive gown was torn and heavily blood-stained, but her ice-blue eyes were bright with manic, feverish power. I genuinely tried to do this the civilized way, she said, her tone almost conversational. Build something real and lasting. Create a kingdom actually worth ruling. But you all insisted on clinging to outdated notions of truth and justice and other useless sentimentality. You murdered innocent people, Kayla said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Children, families, anyone who served your magical purposes.
Necessary sacrifices for the greater good. Seraphine's smile was absolutely terrifying in its genuine belief.
The weak die so the strong can build something better and more efficient. That's simply how the world functions. I didn't invent the rules. That's how monsters justify their atrocities, Theron said flatly.
Call me whatever makes you feel morally superior. Seraphine shrugged, the gesture incongruous with her elevated position and wild appearance.
I came back for what belongs to me. The throne, the kingdom, the power I spent 5 years carefully building and maintaining. You have nothing left, Darius said. Your spell is broken. Your anchor is dead. Everyone knows the complete truth now.
Do they really?
Seraphine's expression turned almost pitying. You think killing Morgana ended my access to power? Sweet, stupid boy. I carved the anchor from her flesh before she finished dying. I have it integrated right here. She raised her right hand and Kayla's stomach turned violently. The skin was marked with fresh cuts and the same circular patterns that had been burned into Morgana's wrists. But these glowed with active power, pulsing with each of Seraphine's heartbeats. I am the anchor now, Seraphine said, her voice rising with triumph. The spell lives directly in my flesh and blood, and I'm about to demonstrate exactly how much power that provides. She spoke 3 words in a language that physically hurt to hear, consonants that shouldn't exist scraping against reality itself. The world tilted sideways. Reality rippled like disturbed water, and Kayla felt the spell slam through the room like a shockwave. Half the pack members present suddenly stopped moving, stopped breathing. Their eyes went completely blank, pupils dilated and unseeing. When they moved again, they moved with coordinated inhuman precision, drawing weapons. Turning toward Darius and Kayla with murder in their empty expressions. No, Darius breathed, horror clear in his voice. Yes. Seraphine's smile was victorious and completely insane. Everyone I touched with the original spell is still connected to me through the anchor now living in my flesh. And I'm calling in every single connection simultaneously. They're mine, all of them.
Kayla counted rapidly, her tactical mind automatically assessing threats. At least 30 pack members with blank eyes and drawn weapons moving with the coordinated efficiency of a hive mind. The guards who weren't affected immediately moved to intercept, but they were badly outnumbered and clearly hesitant to hurt their own people. You can't possibly control this many people simultaneously, Theron shouted, already moving toward a weapons rack. The power drain will kill you in minutes. Then I'll die taking all of you with me, Seraphine screamed, her voice breaking with strain. Blood was already running from her nose. If I can't have this kingdom, absolutely no one will, especially not her. The controlled pack members rushed forward as one. What followed was absolute chaos. Pack members, fighting pack members, nobody wanting to seriously hurt their own people, but having no choice. Darius was trying to issue alpha commands, but the controlled fighters weren't responding. Seraphine's magic had severed their connection to the pack hierarchy. Theron had grabbed a sword and was fighting purely defensively, trying desperately not to kill anyone. Kayla saw Lord Garrett coming at her with a knife, his face twisted with effort. Garrett, fight it! Can't, he gasped, and his eyes were absolutely terrified even as his body moved to attack again. She's too strong! Can't stop! A blade sliced across Kayla's shoulder before she could dodge completely. She hissed in pain as hot blood ran down her arm, soaking into the borrowed gown. Her wolf snarled with fury, wanting to fight back, wanting to hurt the attackers. But these weren't enemies. These were her pack, her people. Hurting them wasn't justice, it was just more tragedy. Kayla's mind raced frantically, searching for options. The anchor was in Seraphine's flesh now, integrated into her body, which meant destroying it required hurting Seraphine directly, significantly. But she was floating 6 feet above the ground, protected by a visible shield of dark magic that repelled every weapon thrown at her. Unless... Darius! Kayla shouted over the sounds of combat. The mate bond! Can you feel it right now? What? He was fending off 3 attackers simultaneously, trying hard not to injure them seriously. Not the time. The bond. Focus on it. It's stronger than her magic. Kayla dodged another attack, her wolf's reflexes finally fully operational after years of suppression. We proved that last night when her killing spell shattered against the bond's protection. Understanding flashed across his face even as he blocked another strike. You want to weaponize the mate bond? I want to use it as a shield. For everyone. Kayla fought her way toward him through the chaos. If we can channel it outward, project the protection, that's completely insane. We've never done anything remotely like that before. We've never had our bond fully active while facing a blood mage trying to murder our entire pack. Kayla reached him, grabbed his hand. The connection between them immediately flared brilliant and hot. Trust me, please. Darius looked at her for one long moment, then nodded firmly. Always. Until the end. They positioned themselves back to back in the center of the chaos, hands clasped tight, and Kayla reached for the mate bond with every single ounce of will and desperation she possessed. Not just passively feeling it, but actively pulling on the connection, drawing the power up and out like water from a deep well. Darius did the same from his side, his alpha strength feeding into and amplifying the bond. The connection responded immediately. Golden light exploded from where they stood, expanding outward in a massive wave. Where it touched the controlled pack members, they stopped mid-attack, gasped, blinked rapidly. The terrible blank look left their eyes as Seraphine's control shattered against the bond's overwhelming power. No! Seraphine screamed from her elevated position. No, that's not possible. That shouldn't work. But the light kept expanding relentlessly, washing over everyone in the hall like a cleansing fire. Kayla felt the bond burning through her, using both her and Darius as conduits for something far bigger than either of them individually. The true mate bond, recognized and amplified by the pack itself, asserting its fundamental authority over dark magic. When the golden light finally faded, every controlled pack member had collapsed to the ground. Still conscious but free, gasping and crying and apologizing in shaking voices. And Seraphine was on the ground too, her magical shield completely broken. Blood poured from her nose, her ears, the corners of her eyes. The anchor marks on her hand were smoking, the flesh charred and cracking. You can't, she started, her voice barely a whisper. We just did. Kayla walked toward her steadily, and she was completely done being afraid. Done being the victim. Her wolf was free, her mate was beside her, and she was every single inch the Luna this pack desperately needed. It's over, Seraphine. You lost everything. Never. Seraphine raised her bloodied, charred hand with obvious effort, the anchor marks flaring one last time. If I can't win, I'll take all of you straight to... The arrow took her directly through the chest. She looked down at it with an expression of genuine surprise. Then her eyes found Theron, who'd grabbed a bow from a fallen guard and was already knocking another arrow. I told you, he said calmly, his voice carrying across the silent hall. You don't fight blood mages head on. You wait for the perfect opening, and you take the shot. Seraphine fell forward onto the stone floor. The anchor marks on her hand flared once more, blindingly bright and searingly hot, then went completely dark. The spell broke. Every single person in the room who'd been touched by Seraphine's magic over 5 years suddenly gasped in perfect unison as their complete, unfiltered memories returned. Not fragments this time. Not partial recollections. Everything. 5 years of false reality crashing violently into absolute truth all at once. It was exactly as catastrophically unpleasant as Theron had warned. People were crying, screaming, some passing out completely from the cognitive shock and physiological overload. But when they came back to consciousness and managed to process what they were remembering, they knew. They all knew exactly what had been done to them, what they'd lost, what had been stolen. And they remembered Kayla. Really, truly remembered her. Who she'd been before. What she'd meant. What had been taken from all of them. Lady Brennan was the first to move, dropping to her knees with tears streaming down her weathered face. Luna, she said, her voice breaking, forgive us. We forgot you. We let this happen to you. It wasn't your fault, Kayla said, but her own voice was hoarse with emotion. None of you chose this. One by one, the pack members still conscious enough to move knelt. Not to Darius this time. To her specifically. Luna, they said, the words spreading through the hall like a wave. Our Luna. Our true Luna. Kayla looked at Darius, completely overwhelmed by the moment. He smiled at her, and it was the first genuine, unguarded smile she'd seen on his face in 5 years.
They're absolutely right. You are Luna. You've always been Luna, even when we were too blind to see it. I was scrubbing floors yesterday morning.
You were Luna surviving an impossible situation with more courage than most warriors could manage. He took both her hands in his. And now it's time to make it official, properly, if you'll still have me, if you can possibly forgive. Yes. She didn't let him finish the self-recrimination. Yes to all of it. We'll figure out the forgiveness part as we go, but yes. The pack erupted into cheers that shook the rafters. And for the first time in 5 years, Kayla let herself believe that maybe, possibly, things could actually be okay. Seraphine's body was burned that same afternoon in the main courtyard, along with every single item that carried her magical signature. The anchor marks were destroyed with purifying fire that burned blue-white and smelled like sulfur and rotting flowers. Theron oversaw the entire process personally, making absolutely certain nothing remained that could possibly be used to resurrect or continue the spell. That evening, Kayla stood on the main castle balcony watching the sun set over the kingdom in shades of orange and deep purple. Her kingdom now, technically. The thought was still completely surreal. Nervous about tomorrow? Darius asked, joining her at the railing. The official bonding ceremony was scheduled for sunset the next day. Barely 24 hours' notice, but the pack had insisted they couldn't wait longer. Terrified, she admitted honestly. I don't know how to be Luna. I spent 5 years being nobody. You spent 5 years surviving something that would have completely broken most people. He pulled her close against his side. You already know exactly how to be Luna. You lead with strength and compassion. You protect those who can't protect themselves. You don't let monsters win. Is it really over? Kayla asked quietly, watching the last light fade. The immediate threat? Yes. Seraphine is dead. The spell is completely broken. Everyone has their real memories back. Darius was quiet for a long moment. But she had allies in the Northern Territories, resources and connections we don't fully understand yet. We'll need to stay vigilant. So not actually over, just pause temporarily. Maybe. Probably. He turned her to face him directly. But we face whatever comes next together this time. No more separation, no more forgetting, no more lies. His gray eyes were intense, sincere. I meant every word I said. You're my mate, my Luna, my everything, and I'm never letting anything or anyone come between us again. Kayla kissed him, and the bond sang between them, whole and true and absolutely unbreakable. When they finally broke apart, she could see pack members gathering in the courtyard far below, setting up for what looked like an impromptu celebration. Musicians tuning instruments, tables being arranged and loaded with food. What's all that? She asked. The pack wanted to celebrate their Luna's return properly. Darius smiled. They've been planning it since this afternoon. I think half the kingdom is coming. For me, for you, for us, for the truth finally winning. He squeezed her hand. Ready to go be celebrated? Kayla took a breath, looking out over the kingdom one more time. 5 years ago, she'd been erased, forgotten, made into nothing. Now she was standing here as Luna, with her mate beside her and her pack waiting below to welcome her home. Yes, she said, I'm ready. They went down together to join their people, and for the first time in 5 years, Kayla felt like she was finally, truly home. The celebration lasted until dawn broke pale and gold over the eastern mountains. Kayla moved through the crowd in the courtyard, still not entirely comfortable with how people looked at her now. With respect instead of dismissal. With recognition instead of that sliding blank gaze the caller had forced on them. Children she didn't know brought her flowers. Elderly pack members she'd never met clasped her hands and cried, thanking her for surviving, for coming back, for being strong enough to endure what Seraphine had done. It was overwhelming in a completely different way than being invisible had been. You're doing fine, Darius murmured in her ear as they paused near the musicians. Better than fine. They love you. They love the idea of me, Kayla corrected. The Luna who survived impossible odds. They don't actually know me yet. Then let them learn. He squeezed her hand. You've got time now. We both do. But time felt like a luxury Kayla wasn't sure they'd actually earned yet. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For Seraphine to somehow come back from the dead. Or for her northern allies to descend with armies. Or for the spell to reassert itself. 5 years of survival had taught her that safety was always temporary, that comfort was a trap, that the moment you relaxed was the moment something came for your throat.
Stop thinking so loud, Theron said, appearing beside them with a cup of something that smelled strongly alcoholic.
You're making the guards nervous, just being cautious. There's cautious and there's paranoid. You're leaning toward the second. He took a drink and grimaced. Though, given what you've been through, I'd say you've earned some paranoia.
Is the perimeter actually secure? Kayla asked, lowering her voice.
As secure as we can make it. Triple guards on all entrances, patrols running every hour. I've got scouts watching the northern road in case Seraphine's allies decide to make a move. Theron's expression was serious. But Kayla, you can't spend the rest of your life waiting for the next attack. At some point, you have to actually live. I will, after tomorrow. After the bonding ceremony makes everything official. And then what? After the next thing? And the thing after that? Theron shook his head. I've seen soldiers do this, survive something terrible, and then spend the rest of their lives in survival mode, unable to accept that the war is actually over. Don't do that to yourself. Kayla wanted to argue, but Lord Castor approached before she could. His weathered face creased with something between apology and determination.
Luna, he said formally, then seemed to catch himself. I'm sorry. Is it appropriate to call you that yet, before the official ceremony? It's fine, Kayla said, though the title still felt strange in her mouth. What can I do for you, Lord Castor?
I wanted to apologize.
Properly. He looked older than she remembered, the returned memories clearly weighing on him. I should have questioned what was happening, should have noticed something was wrong. Instead, I let Seraphine manipulate me for 5 years while you suffered. You were under a spell specifically designed to prevent questioning, Kayla said gently. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? Castor's voice was rough. I'm supposed to be one of the king's primary advisors. My job is to notice inconsistencies, to question decisions that don't make sense. But I didn't. I just accepted everything Seraphine told me because it was easier than thinking critically. The magic made it easier, Darius interjected. That's how blood spells work. They don't just change memories, they change how you think about those memories. Make questioning feel wrong.
Maybe, Castor didn't sound convinced, but I still failed in my duty. To the kingdom. To you both. He straightened his shoulders. Which is why I'm formally requesting to resign my position on the council. I'll stay until you find a suitable replacement, but I don't deserve— No, Kayla said firmly. Everyone looked at her in surprise. You made a mistake, she continued. You trusted the wrong person. So did everyone else in this kingdom, including Darius and including me in the beginning. She met Castor's eyes steadily. But you're here now. You remember the truth. You're trying to make it right. That's what matters. Luna, we're going to need experienced advisors to help rebuild what Seraphine broke, Kayla said. People who understand how the kingdom actually functions. People who've learned from their mistakes and won't make them again. If everyone who fell for her manipulation resigns, we'll have nobody left who knows what they're doing. Castor looked at Darius, who nodded in agreement. She's right, Darius said. I need you on the council, Castor. Now more than ever, but I need you sharp, questioning, never just accepting what you're told, even from me. Especially from you, Kayla added. We need people willing to tell us when we're wrong. Castor was quiet for a long moment. Then he inclined his head in a gesture of respect that was clearly directed at Kayla specifically. As you wish, Luna. I won't resign, but I will do better. I swear it. After he left, Darius looked at Kayla with something like awe. That was well done. Was it? Kayla watched Castor rejoin a group of other council members, his shoulders a bit straighter. I just didn't want him carrying guilt that wasn't really his to carry. We've all got enough of that already. Exactly. Darius pulled her close. You're going to be a good Luna, better than this kingdom probably deserves. I was nobody 3 days ago. You were never nobody. You were just hidden. He kissed her temple. And now you're not. The bonding ceremony was scheduled for sunset the following day, which gave them roughly 18 hours to prepare for something that should have taken months to plan properly. The pack didn't care. If anything, the rushed timeline seemed to energize everyone. Servants working double shifts to prepare the Great Hall. Seamstresses creating a proper ceremonial gown overnight. Cooks preparing a feast that would feed half the kingdom. Kayla spent most of the day in a state of controlled panic, being fitted and primped and coached on ceremonial protocols she should have learned years ago.
Breathe, Lady Brennan instructed, adjusting the gown's neckline for the fourth time. You look beautiful. Stop fidgeting. I don't know the words, Kayla said, for the ceremony. I never learned them. You learned them 6 years ago, Brennan corrected gently. You just don't remember because of the spell, but your wolf remembers. When the time comes, the words will be there.
Kayla wasn't entirely convinced, but she nodded anyway. The gown they'd created was deep forest green, simple in design but clearly expensive. No collar, obviously. Never again would she wear anything around her throat. The seamstresses had understood without being told, leaving her neck bare and free. As sunset approached, Kayla found herself standing alone in the preparation chamber, staring at her reflection and barely recognizing the woman looking back. A knock at the door made her turn. Theron entered, looking uncomfortable in formal dress clothes, but carrying himself with his usual military precision. "The pack is assembled," he said. "Darius is waiting. You ready?" "No," Kayla admitted. "Absolutely not. What if I mess up the words? What if everyone realizes I have no idea what I'm doing? What if—" "Kayla," Theron's voice was firm but kind. "You survived 5 years of hell. You exposed a murderer. You broke a blood magic spell. You think you can't handle one ceremony? That's different. That was survival. This is—" She gestured helplessly at the gown, at herself. "This is being responsible for people, for an entire kingdom. I'm not qualified." "Nobody's ever qualified," Theron said. "Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up and doing your best even when you're terrified. You've already proven you can do that." "Have I? You stepped forward in that throne room when you could have stayed hidden. That took more courage than most people have in their entire lives." He offered his arm. "Come on. Your mate is waiting, and if we're late, the council will have opinions." Kayla took his arm, grateful for the support. They walked through corridors packed with pack members who'd come to witness the ceremony, everyone bowing as she passed, murmuring "Luna" with what sounded like genuine respect. Kayla kept her head up and her expression calm, even though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. The great hall had been transformed, candles everywhere, their warm light reflecting off polished surfaces, flowers woven through the support columns, every pack member of significance present and waiting. And at the far end, standing before the traditional bonding altar, was Darius. He was dressed in ceremonial black and silver, the formal regalia of the Alpha King, but his eyes were only for her, and when their gazes met across the length of the hall, the mate bond flared so bright Kayla almost stumbled. Theron steadied her. "Easy, one foot in front of the other. You've got this." The walk down the center aisle felt like it took hours and seconds simultaneously. Every face watching, every breath held. The weight of 5 years and broken promises and impossible survival pressing down on her shoulders. Then she reached Darius, and he took her hands, and everything else faded to background noise. "Hi," he said quietly, smiling. "Hi," she managed back. The elder performing the ceremony began speaking in the old language, words that had been used for centuries to bind mates together. Kayla found that Lady Brennan had been right. Her wolf did remember. The responses came without conscious thought, ancient and right. "Do you, Kayla Thorne, accept this bond freely given? Do you pledge yourself to this pack, to lead with strength and compassion, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to honor the old ways while forging new paths?" "I do." Her voice was steady. "I accept and I pledge." "Do you, Darius Blackmore, recognize this woman as your true mate? Do you pledge to stand beside her as equal, to honor her wisdom, to protect her person, to bind your life to hers until death parts you?" "I do," Darius said, his voice rough with emotion. "I recognize and I pledge." The elder produced a ceremonial blade, silver and ancient. "Then let blood seal what words have promised." Darius held out his palm. The blade cut quickly, a thin line of red appearing. Then Kayla's turn. The pain was sharp but brief. They pressed their bleeding palms together, and the mate bond exploded into something beyond description. Every person in the hall felt it, gasped as the power washed over them. This was what a true bonding felt like. Not Seraphine's manufactured lies, but something real and fundamental and absolutely undeniable. By blood and bond, by pact and promise, I declare you mated and sealed, the elder announced. Luna and Alpha, bound until death. The hall erupted into cheers that shook the rafters. Darius pulled Kayla close and kissed her, and the bond sang between them, finally complete after 6 years of separation and suffering. When they broke apart, Kayla turned to face the assembled pack as they recognized Luna for the first time. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every person present knelt, heads bowed in respect. Luna, they said in unison. Our Luna. Kayla looked at Darius, who smiled encouragingly. She took a breath and spoke, letting her wolf add strength to her voice. Rise, please, all of you. They stood. I know these have been difficult days, Kayla said, her voice carrying through the hall. You've had your reality rewritten twice in less than a week. You've learned that someone you trusted betrayed you completely. You're confused and angry and probably scared about what comes next. She paused, seeing nods of agreement throughout the crowd. I can't promise that everything will be perfect from now on. I can't promise there won't be more challenges, more threats, more difficult days ahead. Kayla met as many eyes as she could. But I can promise this. I will never lie to you. I will never use you for power. I will fight every single day to build a kingdom where nobody has to suffer the way I suffered, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them, where truth matters more than convenient fiction. The silence was absolute. I didn't ask for this position, Kayla continued. 5 years ago, I would have been happy just to be Darius's mate without all the politics and ceremony. But Seraphine took that choice from me, from all of us. And now we have to rebuild from the ashes of what she burned. She straightened her shoulders. So here's what I'm asking. Help me. Question me when I'm wrong. Hold me accountable when I fail. Be the pack we should have been all along, honest, strong, and bound together by more than just magic and hierarchy. Lady Brennan was the first to respond, her voice carrying clearly. We will, Luna. We pledge it. We pledge it, the pack echoed. The feast afterward was chaotic and loud, and everything Kayla had never experienced in 5 years of invisible servitude. People wanted to talk to her, to share their own experiences under Seraphine's spell, to thank her for surviving long enough to expose the truth. She listened to all of them, remembered names and faces and stories, made mental notes of who seemed genuine and who seemed to have their own agendas already. Being Luna, she was quickly learning, wasn't about wearing nice clothes and standing next to the Alpha King. It was about paying attention, understanding people, seeing patterns and connections that others missed. It was exhausting, but also, in a strange way, exactly what she'd been doing for 5 years, just with different stakes and better clothes. You're thinking too hard again, Darius said, finding her near midnight as the celebration finally started winding down. Just processing, Kayla said. A lot of new information. Come with me. He took her hand. There's something I want to show you. He led her away from the great hall, through corridors that were finally starting to feel familiar instead of foreign, upstairs that wound through the castle's oldest sections. They emerged onto the highest tower balcony, the same one where Kayla had first met with Theron to plan Seraphine's exposure. The kingdom spread out below them, peaceful and dark except for scattered lights from villages and farms. A cool breeze carried the scent of autumn approaching. 6 years ago, Darius said quietly, I brought you up here to ask if you'd accept the mate bond. Do you remember? Not clearly, Kayla admitted. The spell took most of those specific memories. I remember feelings more than details. I was terrified, Darius said. Not that you'd reject me. I could feel the bond. I knew you felt it too, but terrified that I'd somehow mess it up, that I wouldn't be good enough for you. Kayla turned to look at him. You thought you weren't good enough for me. You are brilliant, strategic, kind, despite everything you'd been through as an Omega in a pack that didn't value you properly. He smiled sadly. I was just the guy who happened to be born into the right family. I didn't feel like I deserved you. And now? Now I know I definitely don't deserve you. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you anyway. He cupped her face gently. I'm so sorry for what happened, for forgetting you, for letting you suffer. I know saying sorry doesn't fix it, but stop, Kayla said softly. We can't spend the rest of our lives apologizing for things that weren't our fault. Seraphine did this. Not you, not me, her. I should have fought harder,
You literally couldn't. That's what blood magic does. It takes away your ability to fight, your ability to even recognize something's wrong.
Kayla took his hands. But we're here now. We survived. We won. That's what matters. Darius was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you want? For the kingdom? For yourself? If you could build anything, what would it look like? Kayla considered the question seriously, looking out over the sleeping kingdom. I want a place where nobody gets forgotten, she said finally, where Omegas aren't treated as disposable, where power comes from what you do, not just who your parents were, where someone like me could speak up without fear and someone like you would actually listen. That's a significant change from how things work now.
I know. And it won't happen overnight. People resist change. Kayla leaned against the balcony railing. But we can start small. Change laws that are actively harmful. Create protection for those who need it. Build systems that don't require people to be perfect just to survive. You've thought about this a lot. Had 5 years with nothing to do but scrub floors and think. She smiled slightly. Turns out that's a lot of time to consider how you'd run things differently.
Darius pulled her close, and they stood together watching the stars emerge as clouds cleared.
We'll do it, he said. Together. Build something better than what we inherited. It's going to be hard, Kayla warned. The nobles will fight changes that reduce their power. The traditionalists will say we're destroying pack culture. We'll make enemies. We already have enemies. Seraphine's northern allies won't just accept her death. They'll come eventually.
I know. Kayla had been thinking about that too. Which is why we need to be strong. Actually strong, not just pretending while rotting from inside. A kingdom built on truth can withstand threats better than one built on lies. When did you become so wise? When I had nothing left to lose and nowhere to go but up. She turned in his arms to face him. I learned something in those 5 years. About survival, about strength, about what actually matters. You can take away someone's power, their status, their identity. But if their core remains intact, who they are underneath all the external markers, they can rebuild. Stronger than before because they know exactly what they're made of. You're remarkable, Darius said simply. I'm practical, Kayla corrected, and stubborn, and too angry to quit. All excellent qualities in a Luna. They stayed on the balcony until dawn started painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Below them, the kingdom was waking up, smoke rising from chimneys, early risers beginning their work, life continuing its relentless forward march. Ready to go start changing the world? Darius asked. Not remotely, Kayla said honestly, but let's do it anyway. The following weeks were a blur of activity that left Kayla falling into bed exhausted every night. Reforming the council to include voices that had been systematically excluded. Investigating which of Seraphine's laws had been designed to consolidate her power versus which had actually served the kingdom. Opening channels for pack members to report abuse without fear of retaliation. Creating safeguards to prevent another blood mage from infiltrating the power structure. It was overwhelming and frustrating and desperately necessary work. The nobles are complaining, Theron reported one afternoon, finding Kayla in what had become her personal office. They think you're moving too fast, changing too much. Good, Kayla said, not looking up from the law she was reviewing. If they're comfortable, we're not changing enough. That's not very diplomatic. I don't care about diplomatic right now. I care about effective. She set down the document. We have maybe 6 months before Seraphine's allies in the north decide to make their move. We need to be stronger by then. Actually stronger, not just appearing strong. And you think alienating half the noble class will make us stronger? I think having systems that work and a population that trusts their leaders will make us stronger. Yes. Kayla stood and moved to the window. The nobles have had centuries of accumulated power. They can afford to lose some of it. The people at the bottom have nothing. They need to gain something if we want their genuine loyalty when threats come. Theron was quiet for a moment. You know what you sound like? What? A revolutionary. Kayla turned to look at him. Is that a compliment or a warning? Both. Theron's expression was serious. Revolutions can build something better. They can also burn everything down. You need to be careful which one you're starting. I'm trying to prevent a different kind of burning, Kayla said. The kind Seraphine almost accomplished. If we go back to exactly how things were before she arrived, We're vulnerable to the same manipulation again. We have to change the underlying structure. I agree. I'm just saying, be strategic about it. Change things, but bring people along with you. Don't make so many enemies that you can't actually govern. It was good advice. Frustrating, but good. Kayla forced herself to slow down slightly, to build coalitions instead of just issuing demands, to listen to concerns even when she disagreed with them. It was harder than fighting Seraphine had been, in some ways. At least with Seraphine, the enemy had been clear. 3 months after the bonding ceremony, a messenger arrived from the Northern Territories. Kayla was in a council meeting when the guard interrupted, his face pale. "Luna, there's an emissary from the Northern Alliance. They're asking for an audience." The room went silent. "Show them in," Kayla said calmly, even though her heart was racing. The emissary was a tall woman with silver blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. She moved into the council chamber with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how dangerous she was. "Luna Kayla," she said, her accent marking her clearly as Northern. "I bring greetings from the Alliance and questions about the death of our sister, Seraphine." "Seraphine was a murderer who used blood magic to steal a throne," Kayla said evenly. "She was killed while attempting to use that same magic to murder the rightful leaders of this kingdom." "So you claim?" The emissary's smile was cold. "We have heard different stories, that she was betrayed, that false charges were manufactured." "The charges were proven in front of the entire assembled pack," Darius interjected. "We have witnesses. Evidence. Evidence can be created." The emissary turned her ice-chip gaze on him. "The Alliance requires proof. Real proof. Or reparations for our sister's death." "What kind of reparations?" Lord Castor asked. "Territory. Trade rights. Perhaps a marriage alliance to replace what was lost." The emissary's smile widened slightly. "We're reasonable people. We can negotiate." Kayla felt the trap closing. This was what Seraphine's allies had been waiting for, an opening to either prove the charges were false or to extract concessions that would weaken the kingdom regardless. "You're welcome to review all our evidence," Kayla said. "Speak to witnesses. Examine the documentation of Seraphine's crimes. We have nothing to hide." "How generous!" The emissary didn't sound convinced. "And if we find your evidence insufficient, then we'll address that when it happens," Kayla said. "But the evidence is solid. Seraphine murdered innocent people to fuel blood magic. That's not negotiable truth." The emissary studied her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone easier to intimidate." The emissary's expression shifted slightly, becoming almost approving. "Seraphine wrote about you in her letters, said you were broken, a servant too traumatized to be a threat. Clearly she was wrong." "Really?" Kayla agreed. "I'll review your evidence," the emissary said, "and I'll report back to the Alliance. But know this, Luna. If we determine Seraphine was wronged, there will be consequences. The North does not forget its debts." "Neither do we," Kayla said quietly. "The people Seraphine murdered to fuel her magic deserve justice. Their families deserve acknowledgement. If the North wants to discuss debts, we can start there." The emissary's eyes widened slightly, surprised maybe, that Kayla had turned the conversation back on her. After she left, the council erupted into worried discussion. "This is exactly what we feared," Lord Garrett said. "The North looking for excuses to move against us." "Let them look," Kayla said. "The evidence is solid. If they're honest in their review, they'll find the truth." "And if they're not honest?" Lady Brennan asked. "Then we prepare for war," Darius said grimly. "But we don't surrender truth just to avoid conflict." The emissary spent 2 weeks reviewing evidence. She spoke to witnesses, examined Morgana's body before it had been burned, reviewed testimony from dozens of pack members about their experiences under Seraphine's spell. Kayla didn't sleep much during those 2 weeks. When the emissary finally requested a final audience, Kayla braced for the worst. "I have completed my review," the emissary said formally, standing before the assembled council. "And I must report that the evidence against Seraphine is compelling. The blood magic is undeniable. The deaths are documented. The manipulation is proven." Relief flooded through Kayla, though she kept her expression neutral. "However," the emissary continued, "the Alliance is disturbed that one of our own could commit such acts. It reflects poorly on our selection and training processes." "Your selection processes?" Kayla repeated carefully. Seraphine was chosen specifically to forge an alliance with your kingdom. Clearly, we chose poorly. The emissary's expression was serious. The alliance wishes to formally apologize for the damage our sister caused, and to offer reparations. The council room went completely silent. You're offering us reparations? Darius asked slowly. For the deaths caused by our sister's magic, for the damage to your kingdom's stability, for the suffering inflicted on your Luna. The emissary looked at Kayla directly. The North values honor. When we're wrong, we acknowledge it and make amends. What kind of amends? Kayla asked. Territory along the disputed border, trade concessions for the next decade, and a formal treaty of non-aggression that will last our lifetimes. The emissary pulled out a sealed document. If you'll accept. Kayla looked at Darius, who looked as stunned as she felt. We'll need to review the terms, Kayla said carefully. But, yes, in principle, we're open to this. Good. The emissary actually smiled, and it looked genuine. I should warn you, not everyone in the Alliance is happy about this decision. Seraphine had supporters who won't easily accept her crimes. You may face resistance. We're used to resistance, Kayla said. I can see that. The emissary inclined her head respectfully. You've built something interesting here, Luna. A kingdom that admits its mistakes and works to fix them. That's rare. Valuable. After she left, Kayla finally allowed herself to breathe. Is it really over? She asked Darius quietly. The immediate crisis? Yes. The work of rebuilding? He smiled. That's just beginning. 6 months after Seraphine's death, Kayla stood in the castle gardens watching the first snow of winter fall. The gardens had been completely redesigned. Instead of the elaborate high-maintenance displays Seraphine had preferred, Kayla had commissioned practical spaces, medicinal herbs, food crops, areas where pack members could come to find peace. Productive and beautiful, Darius said, joining her, just like everything you do. Flattery won't get you out of the budget meeting later, Kayla said, but she was smiling. Worth a try. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. How are you feeling? Good. Tired. Overwhelmed. Normal. She leaned back against him. How are you? Same. Also deeply proud of everything you've accomplished. Kayla thought about the changes they'd implemented. Laws protecting Omegas from abuse, systems for pack members to report concerns without fear, regular council sessions where anyone could present grievances, education programs so knowledge wasn't hoarded by the elite. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems, still resistance, still people who resented the changes, but it was better. Measurably, tangibly better than what Seraphine had left behind. I was thinking, Kayla said slowly, about the girl I was 6 years ago. The one who was so desperate to be valued that I would have settled for just being recognized as your mate. No ambition beyond that. And now? Now I want to build something that outlasts us. A kingdom where the girl I was wouldn't need to fight so hard just to be seen. She turned in his arms. Is that too ambitious? Not remotely, Darius said. It's exactly ambitious enough. They stood together in the falling snow, watching their kingdom prepare for winter. Somewhere below, pack members were going about their lives, working, loving, arguing, living, trusting that their leaders were working to build something worth believing in. Kayla thought about the 5 years she'd spent invisible, forgotten, collared, and broken. How close she'd come to giving up entirely. How many times she'd considered just disappearing and letting Seraphine win. But she hadn't. She'd survived, fought back, won. And now she was building something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not giving up on finding me. Even when you couldn't remember I existed. She touched his face gently. Some part of you kept searching, kept questioning. That's what made this possible. We made it possible, Darius corrected. Together. Together, Kayla agreed. The snow kept falling clean and white, covering everything in fresh possibility. Tomorrow there would be more work, more challenges, more problems to solve. But tonight, Kayla was content to stand with her mate and watch winter arrive, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it together. She'd started as a forgotten Omega scrubbing floors in silence. She'd become Luna of a kingdom that was learning to value truth over comfort, justice over tradition, and strength that came from surviving impossible things. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined 6 years ago. It was better. Because it wasn't an ending at all. It was just the beginning.